Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Hope everyone's having a great Tuesday morning. From what I can tell, it's going to be Tuesday all day long. All right, welcome to the first ever developer user group meeting. We've got a ton of content for you guys today. We've met as a kind of a user group, at least for this first meeting here, and we've put together some really great content around VisionPlex. Now, VisionPlex has been like one of the oldest kind of reporting and application kind of design frameworks inside of Plex, like harkening way back until I think the early aughts in terms of Plex's journey. And then it's carried all the way through to UX. So today we've got a pretty exciting topic with Tammy Danner at PAX MachineWorks. She's going to be going through VisionPlex and the basics with custom fields and some pivot tables, which kind of make your data pretty attractive looking. Followed up by that, we've got a really strong presentation by Bill Brutzman. I would classify that as a little bit of the mad scientist category there. He's going to take you through a VP payment kind of application with an application that sits alongside it that does a lot of data processing. And then we've got Revolution Group's very own Lisa Cuvier. She's going to be going through like the differences, comparing and contrasting VisionPlex with IntelliPlex, as they are two very different tools that they're kind of purpose built for different use cases. I'm going to go through myself through building native Plex applications. And then Devin Burke is going to be kind of coming in the tail end there with an update from the product management side of things for VisionPlex. So very fun-filled afternoon, and I guess not afternoon, morning for us. Still my first cup of coffee here. Okay, I wanted to give you guys a quick download of the developer user group if you're not already familiar with the user group here. So the developer user group is right inside of the Plex community. It is really your one-stop shop for all things development inside of Plex. Whether you're using A&O or Mach 2, whether you're using process flows or IntelliPlex, VisionPlex, SQL, integration and APIs. Really, if you're trying to do something kind of nerdy with Plex, kind of beyond like the ERP level of nerdy, and you're getting down to the deep weeds of it, the developer user group, you couldn't find a better place to ask questions, to pull great information out of here. We've got a little bit of a mixture of kind of sharing knowledge here, asking thoughtful questions, as well as sharing some humor and levity when we accidentally refresh our integrated SQL developer inside of Plex, or do all those VisionPlex changes and we don't check out our screen. All right, so the developer user group, we are going to be meeting about every couple months. The user group, we didn't want to have it every single month, as we really respect your guys's time. We want to make sure that we have good polished content for you as we go through this. But this is our first meeting here. We're going to have another one in June, followed by August, October, and December. We're always looking for people to share and present content, as well as if you'd like to host us on site for the developer user group. We'd love to see the shop floor. And kind of as this year goes on, we're going to have some really great content for you guys here on into the future. Okay. I'm going to kind of pass this over to our first presentation of the day, which is VisionPlex Custom Fields and pivots. We got our very own Tammy Danner.
Thanks, David. I'm going to assume that you have my slides.
I do. Yep.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and go to the first. Yes, you could. There you go. Well, this is PAX Machine Works. We're out in the country. We are a fourth generation family business. Founded in 1948, so we're on our 76th year this year. We have 200 full and part-time employees, and we exist on the family farm, 160 acres. And as you can see by the buildings there, they have added on several times. And this is a more recent picture. We have recently added solar panels on the back warehouse. As David said, I'm Tammy Danner. You'll know me on the community as Tamara. That's my given name and my Plex name, but I go by Tammy on a regular basis. We've been here at PAX for about 34 years, coming up in July. My official title is programmer analyst, but I am a jack of all trades. I dabble in about everything under the sun, answer questions, and definitely all things Plex. I lead our Plex group here. I have a couple of other people who also answer Plex questions. But basically, we're a very small IT shop. And so makes things a little more difficult when you are a solo person doing all the programming and coming up with the ideas of how to get data integrated with Plex. So it has been awesome that we have this new group so that we can take our knowledge and share it across the board. So I'm very excited for that.
A quick housekeeping. Can everyone see the slides okay? Give some thumbs up. Okay, awesome. All right, as you were, Tammy.
Okay, next slide. PAX Machine does all of our in-house die design. We build our own tools and we service our own tools. We have 28 presses currently, from 100 ton to 1200 ton, and we use both progressive and transfer tooling. We have secondary operations in-house, vibratory finish, doing the deburring, staking and tapping outside and inside of the tooling, as well as some welding that we do in-house. Subcontract, we send parts out for heat treating, plating, coating, e-coat, etc., and are sometimes responsible for those parts coming back. And we annually ship about 210 million parts. I looked it up, what we shipped last year. So we are shipping from all over the world. So some of the things that people are dealing with, we deal with as well. On our agenda today, I put together some very simple SQL code for our supplier table, which I have custom fields established. Plex has a way of categorizing organizations, but they don't have the same categories that we wanted to see. So we added an organizational type as well as the W-9 date that we got that information, so that we can double check and make sure everything is up to date that way. So I put that code together to show you kind of very simply what we are doing with some custom fields, how that connects in SQL so that we can see it in a VisionPlex screen. Then we'll walk through the basic VisionPlex wizard. We will show you the steps to complete a screen for use, including checking it out, right, David?
Yep.
And
absolutely.
we're going to publish, and then we'll check that screen back out and add a crosstab grid for our pivot. Okay, go ahead. So this is the code. It's very simple. There is a parameter coming into it asking for the supplier status. I don't want to see anything that was deleted or inactive, so I just want to see active stuff. But just in case somebody wants to see that, we're going to give them the option. So when we get to VisionPlex, I'll show you how to wire that up so that you can use it as a lookup and not be banking on them to type in and spell the word correctly. And then once we establish that SQL, then we will need to save it. So if you go to the next slide, once you name it and select VisionPlex data source and save it, then the data source tab at the top on your SQL screen will highlight to where you can click on it. Before you save it, it doesn't show up. I mean, it's there, but it's grayed out. So it's waiting on your first save at least before it will show up as having a data source available to it. So you'll notice that the fields that are listed there is the supplier number, the supplier code, supplier type, and supplier status. You do not see anything with my custom fields of organization type and W-9 date. Those will be showing up once we get to VisionPlex, but we still need to connect that data source to the custom fields so that those show up at a later date. I'm hoping someday Devin gives us the ability to bring those custom fields in here so that we can see them and do some manipulation with the data within SQL. Fingers crossed. Next slide. So once you click on the data source at the top of your screen, this screen will come up and it basically looks like a standard data source. Your input parameters would be exactly what I said that we were going to ask for. We're asking for the status. And then you'll see the output data listed as those four things. Because the supplier number is the key to the supplier, it's an integer, you'll need to click on the lookup field under standard object identifier. Make the connection by putting the supplier in there. I mean, it's just that simple. The supplier table needs to be connected via supplier number, and those are the standard object identifiers that make that work. And that's all there is to it, but with connecting custom fields to your SQL source. Okay. All right, so now we get to create our screen. And David, do you want me to just share my screen?
Yeah, I think that'd be best.
Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. So you will go to the VisionPlex wizard, and all you have to do is a menu search for it. If you have access, you should hop onto this. And you'll notice that there are several things on here that you need not see in a live environment. So I'm anxious to see what Devin's doing with some of these things. But we're going to add just a common grid. So you click on grid, and then you say okay. From here, we are going to not use a custom object. We're going to use our SQL code, which is stored as a query writer stored procedure. And then you type in your SQL program name. And you'll notice that it comes up with those same fields that we had asked for. Our status is our input. And I'm just going to highlight everything that was listed in here. And you'll notice the first four fields are those that we had in our SQL code. But then you also notice our custom fields showed up. And you can drag and drop these in any order that you want them to go to. And as you check mark them, they will order themselves as well. So I'm just going to leave that go as the same thing. And then when you click next, you have the option to include a count or subtotals. If I want a total at the bottom or even a subtotal by category or something like that, I can choose record count just by check marking it. If I want to do subtotals on things that I have dollar values or quantity fields, I can pick that by checking the subtotal. And then if I check the subtotal, I have options of what I want to subtotal by. So those are just different fields that you can choose as your data comes in and get subtotals. It also allows you to do a grand total. All of these features can be added in your VisionPlex screen at a later time if you forget to do them or you change your mind and you want to add it later. It is all possible, but the wizard gives you the option to do it very easily, and I really like that functionality. So if I chose to do a subtotal, down here is where I choose what I want to subtotal. And you'll notice that I can do distinct count, I can summarize, I can even do min and max with these fields, depending on what data type that field is. Since I don't need title or totals for anything that we're doing today, I'm going to leave these blank. And then always, unless you have a reason not to, I always check that I want the print option and the export option. And then finally, we name it. And I'm going to put it in accounts payable, since this data is very much in tune with what they would need for a 1099. And then you click finished. Normally, I edit everything. I change titles, I rearrange things, I edit fields. So I'm going to go ahead and do an edit here. Now, this is what is very, very, very important, is the checkout. This screen automatically is in a published state. So if you are going to make any changes to it, it will let you. You can click in here and you can make any change you want. But as David mentioned in a post in the developers group, it is very painful when you forget to do the checkout. And the more pain that is inflicted, the longer it takes for me to forget to check this out. So I'm going to encourage all of you to make sure that you check your screens out, because it really, you can't tell the difference other than it's not going to be saved. Now, the different checkouts here are several different options. You have enterprise, which if you have more than one PCN, enterprise is what you would want to check out if you want this screen available across your PCNs. If you don't, you can check it out at a company level. You can also check it out on a personal level. And you can also check it out on behalf of someone else. So someone else wants a personal level, you're the one doing it. You can check it out on behalf of that person. So I'm going to go ahead and use enterprise, even though we only have one PCN. And you'll notice that the screen up here changes at that point. So then I know that I have a save button, I'm checked out. So the first thing I'm going to do is wire up the status so that it becomes a lookup field, so that if we have more than one type of status out there, we can give our users the option of looking that up. And they don't have to type in active or inactive or deleted, obsolete. They don't have to remember what it is. We're going to give them those options. So by clicking in the frame outside of the field, because I can click on the field as well, the click on the frame, it gives me everything within that object. I'm going to come over to elements and I'm going to add a picker. Then you'll notice that the picker showed up with its magnifying glass. I don't need this field here anymore, so I'm going to delete it. Then I'm going to click directly on the lookup, and I'm going to come over here and wire it up and set the data source. Since this data source is a Plex stored procedure, I would select stored procedure. But you'll notice that I have a few other objects that are available. So let's say I made a SQL that I want to use as a lookup field. I can do that here, or I can make it static and put in a list of static objects. All of those are capable of ways of creating a lookup. So the stored procedure is supplier status, I believe. And you'll notice that it fills it in. Sometimes it takes some experimenting to get the right one. Then it gives me the wire up parameters. I am not going to fill this one out. I'm going to connect it via supplier status, and you'll notice that it is a variable character. I'll need to wire that up to my screen element, and it is the picker screen element that's there. So once I do that, this piece of it, I usually forget until I get an error message. But you'll need to wire up the data source. This picker needs to get wired to your actual data source itself. When we did the wire up, all we did was connect the data source for the lookup to this field. Now we need to connect this field to the actual data source. And when you drop these down, the value is the piece of information that goes back to your SQL. And sometimes I use the key and sometimes I use status. This time I use the status or the variable character field. The display text is what will show up on the screen once they select something. So it'll automatically fill it in for them. Okay. So that is the piece that connects the data source to the filter. Now we need to connect the filter to the actual data source itself. And this is all because I deleted this field to make it a lookup field. The wizard would have done it all for me and everything would have been fine. But as soon as I deleted that field, then I have to regenerate those connections. So as we connect on the wire up, you'll notice that it is very similar to what we had on the filter. I'm going to connect it to a screen element, the status being the picker. Okay. Now for general house cleaning, I would normally come here, change the titles to be a little bit more easily read and doing some normal house cleaning stuff. But because we're going to add a cross tab or a pivot under this grid at a later time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time making this look really nice. So I'm going to save. And then I always like to preview the data just to make sure the data is connected properly. Make sure that the lookup is working properly, and looks like that is. And then we say search and I get data. So you'll notice that my normal 4 fields of data are here, as well as organization type and the date that the W-9 was received. So great, everything is working perfectly. So now to get this available for someone else to see, we're going to check it in. And you'll notice that our screen changes a little bit. Checkout is now another option, as well as pending changes. Because many people can have a screen checked out at the same time, Plex keeps track of that for you. So we walk through these steps one by one. And to do that, we're going to look at our pending changes, and you'll see that the change that I was making on the enterprise is showing up here. So this is what I'm going to check back in, and now I'm going to publish it. By publishing it, it makes it available for those who have access to it. Now, from here, the person who has the same role as me, an administrator, is the only person that can see the screen. So what you can do is come up to the gears and say run. This is what the screen would look like to the regular user, but they don't have access to it. So what I normally do is come right up here to Security Manager. Click search. And you'll see that our action or our report is listed here. And you'll see that the administrator is the only person that has access to this. Well, I need to let accounts payable people have access to that. So I'm going to edit the rule right here. I'm going to add the accounts payable role. And you'll notice that it is now listed here as well. So anybody who has this accounts payable 1 role will have access to this screen. Any questions so far?
And if you have a question throughout this, feel free to hit that raise your hand. It should be in the top bar inside of Teams there. It's like Amy Moraski has a question. You want to unmute there, Amy?
Yeah, apologies. I literally just turned my head when you were showing how to expose those custom fields. And is there any way you could just pop through that, like the 10 seconds it took?
Sure.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. So within SQL, once you save it, this data source comes available.
Right.
Okay, so once you click on that, you get this screen. And you'll see the 4 fields that we have listed here. All I did was look this field up. Basically, I know that it was the supplier.
Oh, you hooked it to there.
Yep.
Okay.
And you'll notice that the identification column needs to have a supplier number. So because supplier is where my custom field was defined, that is the place that I have to have it here.
Got it. Thank you. I
You're welcome.
apologize.
Nope, you're fine. Sometimes
and
it's the simplest things and it takes 2 seconds to do, but if you forget to do it or don't know where to look to do it, is very easily missed.
Yeah, I should have
I've been
covered that in our housekeeping here. If you guys have any questions, big or small, just raise your hand as we're going through, and happy to stop and answer those things. You have anything more to your question there, Amy?
No, not at all. I've just been pounding on that screen for quite some time. So I thank you very much for.
Does Tyler have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering, since those are made available right there in SQL, is there any plans to be able to run that in SQL, or is it only going to be available in VisionPlex?
It's it's only available inside of VisionPlex and into the kind of the medium term future eventually in Teleplex, but right now just VisionPlex. It's on the back end side of things, it's 2 different kind of databases to store that.
Okay,
It's not an easy lift to expose that to SQL.
We can dream though, right, Tyler?
Oh, I'm dreaming.
Mhm. Any other questions?
Looks like Scott has a question.
Yeah, I was
Yes,
just
Scott?
curious, do the custom fields follow the same refresh for the test database?
They're real time for the custom field values.
So I mean the midnight refresh. So if I load some in production today, are they in test tomorrow?
Yeah, they're the same refresh rate for production to test.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, looks like Bill's got a question.
I don't see why we're doing custom fields for this, because I can do this without custom fields.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
I
you're
just
doing
introduced
it to
custom
demo it.
fields as another piece of options that are available. A lot of people don't use custom fields, so I just thought I would interject them as well with the demo.
Okay, got it.
You are
Thanks.
correct. Anybody else? Yeah, I'm going to go back to my screen. And I had some steps on a slide. I don't know that we necessarily need to go through it. We can maybe use it as review or something. That way I can stay on my screen and not interject anything. So I'm going to use my gears here and go back to the VisionPlex Designer. We are going to check out because checking out is very important.
The first 10 times you don't check out are just as painful as the 50th.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like I said, I go through a painful experience. I'm going to remember it for quite a while. And then when I get away from it and then forget to check out again, it's that pain all over again. Okay, so we have our grid here, but we're going to add a pivot, or what Plex calls a crosstab grid. So if you click on the add button down below, you see that you have options to select several things. I have inserted charts before and they do function. They're just very limited in what you can tailor on them. So crosstab grid. Now, along with the pain of forgetting to check out, there is also pain involved if you forget to hook your data source to this new grid. I have gone through and had the whole thing configured and then go to put my variables on and notice that I don't have any variables available. So please remember that you need to check your data. Make sure that this new grid is connected to your data source. So I'm going to go through the same process that we went through when we first started this. Okay, and you'll notice now I have outputs over here. So from here, what I'm going to do is add some elements. I want to add a column for my supplier code. And I'm going to add another column for supplier status. I like to do these all at once while I'm here. Less clicking. And so what we're going to do is we're going to add a column for supplier code and supplier status. And then we're going to pivot on the organizational type, and the data that was underneath those columns will be the supplier type. So for now, I'm going to just add the data label for these two columns. Then you'll notice that the variable is unassigned. We're going to roll down and we're going to put supplier code on that one. And supplier, what did I say this was? Status. Okay. Then we'll tidy this up by putting in a column heading called supplier code and supplier. Okay. I'm also going to make this one invisible by clicking on the grid, because we have quite a few suppliers and I don't want to run down through all the other ones just to see this grid. So right now I'm going to make this invisible. And I do that just because it's nice to have a data check. If something isn't working quite correctly on my grid down here, I can look and see what data I have available up in this grid. And when you run this on a preview, both of these grids do run. It's just that this one will not be seen because I've made it invisible for now. Eventually, I'll delete it once everything is the way that it should be. So I'm going to save. And then I usually preview, make sure that data is coming through properly before I add my pivot table. I just eliminate things one step at a time, just to make sure everything is good. And as you can see, I don't see any suppliers. Very, very interesting. So why is that? Oh, I know why. Because when I hooked up my data source, I never wired it to my filter. So let's put that together. This is why I double check everything to eliminate problems with the pivot. Let's try that again. There we have data. Okay, all is well. So now we're going to add our pivot column. So go to your element. If you have a place where you want totals on your pivot, you would do an aggregate column, but we don't need that today. So I'm just going to do a pivot column. Under the pivot column, we need to add a column, and you can pivot more than one thing. Today we don't need to. And then under the column, we need to add the data label. Under the data label, we are going to add the value for the supplier type. So this is the data that will be in our columns once we pivot. Okay, so far so good. Now to make this pivot, Bill, you have a question?
Yeah, could you show the top grid, Tammy? Because I'm unclear on what exactly you're pivoting on. I realize you might have too much data, but if we could make the top grid visible for a second and just display it, then
Okay,
that would help me follow.
okay. Let me save that and we'll preview so you can see the data again. You'll notice there's both grids are there. Yeah, our key's not set up yet. So you're going to get that. We're halfway through the setup of this. But you can see the supplier type are all kinds of different things. The organizational type, there are several, including blanks. There are several things in here as organizational type. So what we're going to do is make organizational type column headings. And then when underneath the column headings, we're going to put the supplier type. So under the column type for individual sole proprietor, we will see that that is a carrier for this particular line. Okay, so that's where we're going. Now, to make this pivot finished, we need to add the pivot key property. So what is it that's going to be those column headings that's going to pivot? Well, we talked about having it be the organizational type. So that is going to be the titles across the top that make all the different columns that pivot. Then I also need to tell it what makes each record unique. It has to be identified. So in this instance, I'm going to use the supplier code. And then you select it, and then you have to add it. If you have more than one thing that needs to make this unique, you need to add every single one of them in here. Okay, so let's say I have a supplier, and then I also have a list of a lot of invoices for that supplier. I'm going to need to make each one of those lines unique. So sometimes I would need to add the invoice number on here as well to make that somewhat unique. So if you get duplicates or you get errors, come back here and look at your record identifiers, because the pivot is going to require you to have a uniqueness for each row. Okay. So that is all there is to doing a pivot. I may put a title on here. Okay, we'll save. And then we'll preview. Select our status. And you'll notice that there are All of our organizational types are across the top. And it has filled in with the type of supplier that they are underneath those columns. Now you'll notice that I've got 2 blanks here. Those 2 blanks confused me at first, but what those are is if I have not selected an organizational type, I get a blank. And if it was a supplier that was there before I added the custom field, it is also missing from the custom field table. So one of these is an old, I never updated it from the custom field standpoint. And one of them is I had selected blank. So that's where the differences for these come into play. You notice we all have them all filled in. Do we have any questions? And of course, I would go through the check-in process as well for this. Pending changes or the changes that I just made. And publish. Oh, I forgot to take that grid out. Oops. Normally I would delete this grid so that it doesn't run and occupy CPU time. Makes it much quicker. Yes, Bill?
Can you pick a default setting for status? Doing what you're doing with custom grids, like there's an initial field thing over on the right for that box?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. It is under data and set initial value. So when I set initial values, of course, I would have to check that out. I forget if it is part of that piece of it or not. David, do you remember? I don't do this often enough. If I pick my normal one or if I do the static. Because it's part of the wire up.
Yeah, you can pick your normal one or you can have it as static. The thing I would recommend if you're doing it based off of keys is that you put the key into your stored procedure that you've written in SDE to be able to look that up versus like typing the name in there explicitly.
Yeah. But yes, you can do that. Yes, Bill.
So way in the very beginning, when creating a VP app, when I do it here, I don't get 5 choices. I just get 2 choices of things to create on the very first screen.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree with you. I think there are some things that are coming in VisionPlex that is not in the live environment yet.
So that's in test right now?
Yes.
Yeah. And Devin will be at the end of the content today from like 12:15 to 12:45. He's going to be going through that very thing. I don't want to spoil more of it, but there's going to be a long lead up until Devin's content.
So, oops, sorry. So stay for the end.
Any more questions before I stop sharing my screen?
We've run into a few issues on some pivots, and it takes some experience to get through it. You covered a couple of the fields on that cross tab, the pivot key property name and the record identifiers. It's just good to know exactly what those are for. The key property name, what value does that have, if anything?
I have not found anything. I just know that it confuses me every time I'm in here.
Okay, we're on the same page then.
Yes. And I know that if I put the, if I use this one, instead of the pivot key, it throws errors and causes all kinds of problems. So I have notes in my binder that says this is the field to use. I have no idea what this is for unless it is, I don't know, part of a different type of grid or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I assumed that it was meant to do what the record identifiers, the way you described it, does. But yeah, I don't know if there's anyone more in the know on the call that might have some explanation for it. But yeah, certainly it's easy enough for me to ignore it and not use it. But curious minds.
Yeah, I fall into the camp where I like to use the key property name and the pivot property, the pivot key property name. Usually when I use that, I don't touch the record identifiers at all, and I'll create my own kind of pivot key column inside of SQL that I have my full control around my group bys. And usually I'm doing some type of aggregation in SQL.
So those are interchangeable. So that's like a single point of unique record identifier versus kind of building a composite key.
You got it.
Good to know.
I think that like that building that column instead of SQL, specifically if you're doing like aggregations and things like that, is way more performant to do that in SQL. But if you're not doing any aggregations, you're just putting complexity for complexity's sake in your SQL, and you're better off using the record identifiers like Tammy did here. Usually, like as an example, like when I build out like an exploded bomb query, I will build that because I want that to be listed in a very specific order for the SQL coming out, right? You want to have that indent going out. And if I want to pivot based off of that, I want to use that, like the indentation for my pivot key to make sure I've got that one specific unique row of the SQL there and have it displayed out correctly.
Right. I think Eric has a question.
Yes, I noticed, excuse me, when you made the report available, you went to Security Roles Manager and then assigned it to a role. I've always gone to the reports page and then made it active and then gone to security roles and then assigned it to a role. So you don't have to go to the reports page. Is that true?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, that does make it so that you can search it. I think that's the big difference there is like when you turn the report on or not. Is if you don't turn the report on, it doesn't show up in the search box.
Yep, you still have to do that. My apologies. Yep. But at least it assigns the role to it right then.
Okay, and then I had the second question, and maybe it's one of the wishes is when you were going through the wizard and setting up the filters, I have the same steps that you had to go through, where normally it gives you like I'll call it a generic filter, not a picker. Is there any way to set it up right then so that way you don't have to delete and then add a picker and then rewire it all up if you could just choose to use a picker right from the beginning in the wizard?
Right, that would be more convenient. I think the wizard is made for simplicity's sake. So if you want to add a lookup on your filter, that's your choice then at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, personally, I wish there was an option in the wizard for you to say, yeah, I don't care about any of this. Just drop me to the designer.
Agreed. Any other questions while I've got the screen? This application may not, pertain to anybody, but I thought it was simple enough that we would get the idea of what it was that we needed to pivot and Also includes some custom fields as a bonus. Not required, of course.
I think well done, Tammy.
Thank
Well
you.
done. Alrighty, next on the day's agenda today, we have Bill Brutzman. He's going to be presenting the ACH VP payment application.
Hi, everybody.
I'll pass it over to you, Bill.
That's me. Before I couldn't see the screen, so I don't know if I could only see it when Tammy shared hers.
I changed how I was sharing there. I shared the screen versus sharing the PowerPoint.
I'm just seeing a list of names.
Yeah, I think the sharing stopped. There we
Yep.
go.
Okay, that's better. I can see it now. So our bank, happens to be Valley Bank, said to us they want to do ACH payments. And a cool thing is that Plex has this already, even in Classic. And we went through it and sent some data to Valley, and one of the fields was whacked. And I talked to, I'm not sure what they call themselves, but the Plex Custom Pro designers. And for Plex to do this for us was a big, expensive deal. And since we're a small company, we weren't going to do that. So I groaned at first because I hadn't done anything with this, but then I figured I could just grab the data and send the file to them ourselves. So next slide, please. Or do I do that?
Yep, I can hit next slide.
Okay, so here in Classic, for those of you who have it, some of the banks are listed there that Plex has been proofed out to work with, and it's rather robust. It's nicely integrated with paying suppliers on those screens. If you're looking for this in Plex, instead of looking for ACH like in search, I think an easier way to find it in the docs is NACHA, N-A-C-H-A. And you can see NACHA in this text. But anyhow, next slide, please. Or can I do this maybe?
Yeah, if you get your presentation, I didn't change your format. If you just want to present it and run through it, Bill.
Well, let's stick with this since it
Okay.
works, but I can't, when I click on that, it doesn't work. So that's our bank. Valley is a national bank, but they're mostly East Coast. They have one or two branches in Hollywood or something, but they're not Wells Fargo or anything. So next slide, please. And testing is really key to this. We're not going to do a lot of testing here as part of this, but what we're doing is we're grabbing all kinds of data from Plex. We're putting it in a special format. We're uploading the file on an encrypted connection, and then they're paying people. So there's dollars involved, and so it's obviously we want it to be correct, and we don't want to have to pay twice. And once one of these transactions goes through, that's pretty much it. I guess another general ledger type of correction could be done in another go around, but it's kind of a one-way street. So anyhow, next, please. And this is what I was mentioning before, to look for NACHA in the Plex documentation. There's a few things here. And I would encourage you that if you can do this in Plex, that's going to be a little bit easier. Although this, I think, is fairly, what I'm talking about today is fairly easy, me and my big mouth. Anyhow, next slide, please. So let's see what I have here. So when we do a payment, we need three things. We need the bank routing number and the checking account number of the supplier, just like everybody here, I presume, has a checking account with a bank, and those two numbers. And the other thing we need is an email address. And so we're creating an ACH file, we're uploading it to the bank. The nice thing about doing this inside Plex, if you're able, is it's all integrated. The thing I have is, well, I learned this news that we needed to do this, and I kind of groaned, and we'll see maybe on the next slide. There's a spec for how all this data gets formatted. Here's just in Classic if you have it. If you look for NACHA, you'll find it better. If you look for ACH, I don't think you'll have as much luck unless you use percentage wildcards or something. So next slide, please. And I have this code, which is MIT licensed, so you can clone it and use it. And if you need help with it, I'm happy to help you with it. The name of it on GitHub is a little different now. It's still Brutsy and it's still ACH, but it's fleshed out a little. It says something like ACH, SQL, and Go in there in the title, but I hardly have anything in GitHub, so you'll see that there. And so the code that's there is the SQL code that's in Plex. I don't have any screenshots of Vision Plex or anything because that's kind of proprietary. I also have my Golang code that's there, and I have step-by-step instructions in the README of kind of the sequence of what the files are that we're talking about that we'll see in a second. On the next slide, please. So on my screen, I like using favorites, and the two main things here are supplier banks, and I'm just calling this this main program to do this ACH payments, and that AP check details I'm not really using, but this was kind of a development moving target effort. So next one, please. And because this is financial, unfortunately, I had to obfuscate this stuff out, but you can see that before we can even do any payments, we need routing numbers and bank accounts and emails. So this is for our bookkeeper who's sending emails to all our suppliers just to see who we have in our database already. A thing that I changed in this, I have to confess we're not fully live with this. The programs work and I'm still testing and debugging. I still have a couple of bugs with Valley to work out, but a trick, instead of using those zeros in there for bank account and routing numbers, you'll see in the spec in a second. I just changed these yesterday to for the bank account 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and then for the routing number 987 654 321. So those are obviously not real account and routing numbers, but the spec for the file creation is really fussy in terms of the number of characters and blank spaces between fields and stuff. And I guess I almost asked this question of Tammy, but this is a couple of things in VisionPlex that I do in almost every report is I use color to highlight things. So here, I'm kind of using pink as an error message, meaning, hey, the bank accounts are not really there. So I have dummy bank accounts. A thing with Plex is I can't send emails from test in Plex. So I'm setting up, I really need at least 2 dummy supplier accounts to be able to test this out. And in my former life, my boss, who was our accountant, I tried doing penny transactions and he told me about general accounting rules and Bill, you can't do that. But our bookkeeper is cool with doing stuff like that. So we're doing like dollar transactions. If a transaction that shows up in the pay list is less than $1, then obviously we don't want to send it to the bank for an ACH payment. The idea behind these payments is we're not printing a check out on a laser printer and putting it in a US mail and putting a postage stamp on it, but rather zapping it. And our local vice president of the bank is hot on doing this, and I couldn't figure out why, but I'm sensing the reason the banks like doing this is because the more they can do in ACH, the less they have to do in manual labor on the part of clerks, zapping checks through micro readers and stuff like that. So the other thing I do in all my apps is I do column width, and you notice on the right side I have a blank column with non-repeating rows that's blue, so it doesn't take up the whole screen. It's a little easier on the eye. Another thing that I wasn't expecting to talk about is after the name of all our in-house reports, I put a caret after supplier banks up top. Earlier in the game, I would put a period after that, but that dot notation in object-oriented programming and maybe ASP, that caused some Plex problems. So Plex Tech Support asked me to stop putting periods in the name of my apps, and the caret there helps users distinguish, hey, is that something Bill did here, or is it a real Plex app? So next slide, please. And so here's that other favorite that's in there, and this is how we get into this. And you can see that this is kind of sparsely populated. But when the bookkeeper wants to do an ACH payment, as we get this thing live and we get more bank accounts and routing numbers and stuff, you can see we have a bunch of different suppliers in the blue supplier column on the left. And so for her to get the ball rolling, she would click on the date. Notice on the right I have payment type, and in Plex that's defined as either it's multiple choice. There's checks and there's ACNs. I think there's another option, but for the purpose of this discussion, when this thing becomes more real, instead of saying payment type, that would say ACN for the real ACN payments. And so the app is not going to create any data for anything unless it's an ACN payment type. And so obviously we have the amount, and we can go back by payment type. A cool thing about this is we don't really have to save our ACH files because we can regenerate them anytime we want to from the basic time that they were generated in Plex per that date. So we're navigating to another Plex app by clicking on that date. And the amount is in green. So next slide, please. And so this is what, this is the result of clicking on that, navigating to this ACH payment file, and it's injecting the date into that ACH date. I don't have to type it automatically. That's a little tricky to do. That could be another little demo in this club someday. But you can see in the text in the bottom is the text chunk that is created. Now, a little problem with this data in SQL, as far as I know, some hotshots out there might be able to streamline this a little bit, but you notice I have underscore space going all along. In SQL and in VisionPlex, if I have multiple spaces, it kind of crunches them all together. So a trick I'm doing with this is, well, a couple of things. I created a tech support case or something, or maybe it was a community suggestion of how to do this. Or, oh, I know what I wanted. I wanted to be able to download the straight to text in here. And Devin Burke wrote back and pointed out that we could just use a CSV file. My heartburn before doing it with the CSV file is that when using that Excel tool, Excel tends to put stuff into columns, which we don't want. But anyhow, what the bookkeeper does after arriving here is just clicking on that button, and it's going to run a little program. I'm sorry, it's going to download a CSV file, and I like saving it to the desktop and just saving it as ACH. So next slide, please. So here's the next slide. So underneath there, it will say export the CSV, export the Excel. There's two other exports that's on there. We're just going to click on that export the CSV. So next slide, please. And then this is what the thing looks like you can see I have highlighted Excel in the top corner. And earlier on when I was working on this thing, I thought I had to worry about headers so as to prevent this thing from columnizing and putting stuff in arbitrary columns. But because the spec sprays this data all over the place, Excel doesn't really do that if you want to use Excel. So anyhow, we're just going to save this file as ACH, and it knows it's a CSV file already. And remember that it's got all these underscores going across for spacing, which the underscores I really want to be blank spaces. And next slide, please. So on the desktop, I have, so I downloaded that CSV file. I have a little Go program that I'll talk about in a second that I'm just calling ACH Prep. And what that ACH Prep XA file does on the desktop, you could just click it, or you could run it from the command line. Either way, but clicking it's easier. It's going to create a new file, and in Go, I can name it in a meaningful way. So I'm naming it Go. I'm sorry, I'm naming it ACH with the year, the month, and the date. And then when I've done uploading it to the bank, or I'm done working with it, I can just put it in the recycle bin. I sort of don't want to save this on a server because I sort of don't want to encrypt it again, because I don't want anybody to hack anything. So a nice thing about doing this on the bookkeeper's desktop computer is nobody's going to hack that. So next slide, please. And if I look at that file in Notepad, which is what this is, you can see my Go file has taken out the underscores and replaced them with blank spaces. And you can see this example, there was just one payment to a plating company in this test. But notice in this file, on the very left, there's a 1, and then underneath that, there's a 5, and then at the bottom, there's a 9. So each of these data strings, varchars, if you will, they're either 93 or 94 characters in length, is a so-called block, and that's what those are. Unfortunately, after 5 it's really 6, 8, and 9 that I've highlighted over. Anyhow, next slide, please. So after we've downloaded that ACH file, the bank is going to have some software to just upload that file to the bank, and we've done that. And so earlier on in this thing, I thought my job was done. That's all I had to do. But the trouble with checks is there's a check stub at the bottom, and there might be multiple invoices that are paid by one check. What a nightmare. I don't want to pick through all of those payments and add them up. But fortunately, I don't have to do that. Fortunately, in Plex, it's easy for me to grab each of those line items and add them up. So after the bookkeeper does this and gets comfortable with it, and my colleague here is comfortable with this procedure, another consideration in this is the president of our company, who is going to do this in the beginning. He trusts our bookkeeper to do these transactions, and there's a little bit of handshaking in all of this. And so our company president, it's just getting the same list of bills to be paid that he's approving. And typically there might be, I don't know, 2 dozen, and 90% of them he says, okay, pay them. He might want to hold up on a couple of them for whatever reason. And so he's not in the loop. The only person really doing this is our bookkeeper. So she's downloading the ACH file, uploading it, and then she's sending emails, remittances to all of the suppliers. Now, she doesn't want to go through the remittances one by one. And I don't know if people who are doing ACH within Plex are having to send remittances one by one. If so, they may want to do this instead, which is certainly possible. But so let's pretend our bookkeeper, Hella Jaworski, clicked on the remit button, and next slide. So when she clicks on the button, it opens up this remit screen, which is kind of a summary of what the email is going to look like. Typically, there'd be more than one plating customer, but you can see in this thing, for this kind of real example, that there were 3, 6, 7 different invoices, and there was a total check amount for all of those. And I could just easily grab those from Plex, with the invoice dates and their email and the check number. I'm not sure if when we do an ACH, if we get a check number, but there has to be something like a check number in Plex. And
The
so
payment number.
yeah, if it is a payment number, fine, then this would say payment number on top there. So here again, the bookkeeper would just click on that remit.csv button to go to the next slide. And here again, I'm telling her what to save it to, so she doesn't really have to remember. And we're gonna, the CSV is just to export to CSV. So the first one we're just calling ACH. This one we're just calling remit. So next slide, please. And this is what the remittance looks like in Excel and CSV, which is the same as what we just saw a second ago. And I guess well, now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it's possible that, well, I'm babbling. Let's go to the next slide. There's another Go program called Remit, just like that ACH prep. And I realize probably most people here haven't done much with Go. It's a language from Google that does parallel processing. It's intended for servers. I really like it because it's new and it's fast, and but you can, it's free. You can just go to look for Golang and install it on your computer. To create an .exe file, it's just this Go build. Remit prep is the source code for this thing that we'll see in a second. So some of this Go stuff we're doing in Visual Studio, the code itself, and then the command line stuff is built into Visual Studio, or in this case, I just did it in the terminal in Windows. So next slide, please. And so you can see in I have a little directory on my C drive, and I have two little programs here. I have achprep.go and I have, when I do that Go build, achprep.go, it'll create that .exe file. And likewise for the remit prep thing. And next slide, please. And we use WebRoot for antivirus. And a microscopic hitch in this thing is when I send the remittance file from Go, my antivirus thing is flagging me and pausing, and even if I click allow always, it always prompts me with this. So just because I'm running a program that kind of works with the internet, sending an email out, I get this, so no big deal. So next slide, please. And okay, so here is what the email looks like. And a cool thing that we'll see in a second is when I'm sending an email from the bookkeeper's computer's desktop, and it shows up in her sent mail. We happen to use Google email. Unfortunately, we don't have Teams, much as I've been lobbying for it, but we probably never will. But this is what the email going to the supplier would look like. And so that bill B is from me, and I'm just sending it to my own personal email. And if anybody sends me something there, I don't look at it all that often, so you're better off sending me a message at Bilby@HK Metalcraft. But anyhow, this is the Go program is just grabbing the items and the amounts to, and the total is up in the top thing, who the payee is and the check number and so on. So I like this a lot. Anyhow, next slide, please. And you can see I did a bunch of tests, and there's my sent box, and it's all there. I use Outlook, of course, because my name is Bill. But they all went through. A nice thing about Plex emails is they show up in that communication log, but these are not from Plex that way. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's some of the gory details of what the spec is for Notcha. There's a website, notcha.org, and there's companies that are all too happy to charge you hundreds of dollars for tutorial videos on all of this, and I haven't taken any of those. But that supplier payment, you could see those are all 6 records. And the first character on the left, we looked at the 1 and the 5 and the 9, the trailer, and next slide, please. The whole name of the game of this program is grabbing that Plex data and putting them into strings and putting a carriage return at the end of the string. And this website, it's independent, it's not part of Notcha, but they do a nice job presenting clearly what this stuff is. I did get a spec from Valley. It's nothing proprietary. If people want to see it, I'm happy to send it. But next slide, please. This is kind of a universal banking standard. And so here's where, the first one has got to be in field 1, and the priority code has got to be 2 digits, and Valley and all the other banks have the size of all these data fields is standard. They want, YY, MM, DD. And so the bulk of the work in this thing is just grabbing all that data in Plex and crunching it into this data format, which is not trivial, but next slide, please. It's kind of a fair amount of boring work that, and there are some tricks for string management in here. So this is just showing 5 as the first for that data block. This is the so-called batch record. Next, please. And this is field 6. I didn't know anything really about this, although I've noticed since that some of my transactions, personal transactions, tend to be ACH. So this is something that's not going to go away, and we all kind of use whether we know it or not. So next. And this is the 8 and 9 records. A thing that it does is we're adding up all the supplier payments into the one big payment, and the dollars and cents in that total amount field, 30 to 39 in that top block, there's no period in there, so paying attention to all of that. A thing I messed up on, which is kind of trivial, is I put a Julian date in that I kind of wrote some SQL code to figure out, and the bank is putting in the Julian date themselves, so they want 3 blank characters there. So there's some stuff like that that you kind of have to work with your bank to test and troubleshoot. So next, please. And I'm just recapping. I'm just clicking on this date. Let's go next. And okay, the reason I showed that last slide is what that program, what the code is, the SQL code behind there. I like using temp tables quite a lot. For now, I'm just limiting that first screen to 2 weeks ago, the most recent payments. And all I'm doing in this table, which I'm getting from a sub-program called Payments S103 over on the bottom right is the name of this thing. I'm giving it a start date and an end date with like month, date, year format. And I'm filling in this table to show that last screen of the colors and stuff. The way I'm doing it is with this thing, which should be on the GitHub site. So next, please. And I'm just selecting that data for the VisionPlex report. A thing I like to do in all my reports is column width, and in almost all of my reports, I just put double quotes at the end, and I save it at ZZ, and then I adjust the column widths of all the other columns and leave the last column without a column width, and then Plex will auto adjust that last column, and it makes it so it's, if I have a 6-digit part number, it's not taking up half a screen, just to show that it's, so I can cut and paste those, do screen captures and send emails to people without them having to have a huge monitor to look at it or squinting. Anyhow, next, please. And so a key thing in SQL is converting dates with the 101 format. And I like using varchar 11 because then I just hit the 1 button twice. So even though if it's a 6-digit field, I'm always doing 11. If I know it's longer than 11, like a long part number, I might make it 50. Another trick, instead of using varchar 11 or varchar 50, is you could put a varchar max in there, and then it is, then you're kind of home free. Because this one is a sub-program, up in the top left corner, I'm calling it payments with an S, versus if it's an app for VisionPlex, I call it V for version. So that way I can distinguish my sub-programs from my code. And I'm just getting this data from accounting AP check. And I like using the database name, A for accounting, underscore, and then a shorthand of the table that it's from. So AP check becomes APC. Instead of just using a single letter, this makes it readable. And another trick in our world is if I type as and then put what I want to call this thing in quotes, it'll show up in green and a different color. So it makes it easier to read. Another trick is putting commas in the front. That way editing the programs is faster Although in my case, it took me several months to get used to doing that. Anyhow, next screen, please. So here's a snippet of that code, and I'm not including all of the supplier types because sometimes we pay people, employees and such, although it would be possible to include employees in ACH, which I think is kind of cool. And another coding trick I do is I indent the, like on those first two lines, I move that over so I can read it myself. Next slide, please. And so here's how I navigate. So by highlighting that dated field and navigate, and I'm navigating to that ACH payment file. Next. And so I'm showing the code behind this thing next. So next. So I'm just giving it the date. And the formatted date, I'm using a _F. Happens to be 11 characters anyway. And this is version 103 because 101 and 102 had some problems, and I had to start over. So anyhow, next slide, please. Okay, this is what I think is the good stuff. Because there's so much detail in this thing, I took some pains to declaring variables and defining variable lengths. A cool thing that even though I've been in this space for quite a while, I didn't even know that SQL had char. So instead of being an adjustable char field where something could be up to 11 characters, it could be 6, it didn't matter. By saying char, open parentheses 10, that means this declaration of a variable L13, which is in line 1, which is really block 1, and the third field is 10 long, and I'm initializing it with spaces. Here again, this code is on the GitHub thing, and I didn't want to bore people by wading through however long it is, but you can see using comment statements, I have F1, F2, F3 at the bottom, and a curious thing in making this thing security sensitive is our HK Metalcraft bank account does not appear in any of this ACH data that we're uploading. So the banks use the company social security number, if you will, the company number, which is not the same as our account number with Valley that goes in there. So the bank knows for our social security number what our account number is. So that's protected. So over on the right, I'm just first I declare L11, and then I'm defining it. So the record type code for this one is just 1, and it's a string in single quotes. And then when I insert it into my temp table, notice I have all these plus signs. So I'm just concatenating all of these strings into one line. And at the end there, I have a little typo that the bank picked up on. Instead of a space, I have to put like char 10 plus 13, I think, as a line feed. Notice at the very top, I started working on a header because I thought that Excel would want to put this stuff in columns, and I don't really need that, so I kept it in there. And you might have seen stuff like that, like 1 through 10, and sometimes double rows and the old green bar things. But the dots up there represent 2 and 8, and the colon is 5. So if I hold that over the data that prints out, I can line it up easier. So in troubleshooting this thing, you may want to really declare that and include it in something. I'm a little bit proud of this because it gets really messy without doing something like this. And so this is done for all 5 blocks, 1, 5, 6, 8, and 9. And that's all in the GitHub download. So next slide, please. Like I'm saying there, it's all pretty much the same kind of stuff. And a key command in this thing, and I'm a little embarrassed to say what it does, is because I don't remember what this trim thing is. Of course, at the bottom where it says right in blue, comma 12, that's the rightmost 12 characters of this stuff. So yeah, actually what I'm doing is concatenating all those zeros with the trim is taking everything out of the dollars trim except real characters. And I'm concatenating that with the cents. And then the whole thing, I want zeros in front of it. And just give me everything that's on the right. And that way over on the left, that uppercase F, I'm trying to say this is a formatted version of the total debit that I'm putting in there. So next slide, please. And then all I'm doing is I'm just selecting, the temp table is just one line, and I'm inserting them one after another in those blocks. And then at the end of that VisionPlex screen where it's showing all the text, this is all the command is. And I think on the next slide, I'm just using this in VisionPlex. Yeah, so that's just the temp table. It's just one record. I'm injecting the date up in the top. That's the same name of the data source program. And next slide, please. And this thing with injecting data I found is a little tricky. Since I don't do it every day, I don't remember it all that well, but that view screen info, I think we have to add, maybe we have to add a parameter in there for that. But anyhow, I'm injecting it and it's static, and it's it's a screen parameter just like it was in Classic. And that should help. So next slide, please. And then the purpose of this slide is just to remind us of where we are in this story. So coming up next is the remit thing. And here's maybe I'm showing the remit code. I do have it in GitHub. But there's also the remit CSV thing in Golang, which is a little bit more interesting. So next slide, please. And so here's the SQL code for this. Again, this is in Git. And I'm just grabbing up. This is just for the VisionPlex screen to see what we're talking about. And if I don't have a routing number greater than 1, then it's not going to show anything. There's going to be thank you. No, you're all right. So we saw this before. That's what it looks like in Excel. Next, please. And so here's Go. Next slide, please. So I encourage you to download and install it. It's really an amazing, brilliant thing. Next slide, please. And there's installation instructions. And there's some nice tutorials on it. There's all kinds of YouTube stuff. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is some Go code. This is the program that creates the ACH file that we're going to upload to the bank. And the thing that's in Go is it's similar to regular what I think of as traditional programming languages, but I have to import some things first up top, which is what that is. And then you can see I'm telling it what I want this file to be called that we're saving. A thing that's in Go is in that file data, error. If I try doing something and it doesn't work, I can, kind of like a try and catch, I can code it so I get a message that there's a problem there rather than just leaving the programmer dangling. So the main event of this thing is just this clean string thing near the bottom where I'm just replacing an underscore with a space bar. And I forget what that split thing is, but I have a total number of lines. So whatever the length of that thing is, I have a for loop, which is common in other programming languages. And I have the rest of this code on the next slide, please. And
that split there made a slice of strings based on your text file is taken in there.
yeah, in my former life, using PIC universe, a really key thing in databases is a dynamic array. And arrays in Plex, like I guess David was saying, there's a thing called a slice. And it takes a little getting used to, and I'm not saying I'm used to it. I keep reminding myself of it. But basically that thing is just cleaning up the underscores and turning them into spaces. And then under this, I'm just using the time function to find out what the date is. A quirky thing, all of these computer things have quirks. A quirky thing in this thing is that format of 2006. I tried putting in today's date as a format. That doesn't work. So that 2006 0102 is a special Go thing. So to do what I'm doing here, you really have to use that format. And you can also see that I have another error message. And notice this one is error 3. I gave it a different error number because it gets confusing when we're troubleshooting. Hey, I got the same error all over the place. Anyhow, you can just copy and paste this code. It ought to work, but you probably most of you guys will want to play with it also. Anyhow, and I'm happy to help people out with it. Part of my reason of sharing this is I hate for people to get stuck in it. So here's a similar program with the emailing, the remittance thing. And notice I'm importing net SMTP, which is the emailing magic that's in Go. And this one, you may remember I have a bunch of different emails that I'm sending it to, like each supplier. I don't want to do it manually each time. And I really should have hidden this. I don't think anybody will steal it, but that auth thing, that plain auth, is something that code that's in there is in Google, and I should probably have a link to showing where that is in there, but every email address has their own code so they can email stuff out. And there are some more sophisticated emailing tools available in Go. But you notice I have a recipient, and I'm taking that auth screen and plugging it into this thing, and I have a subject. And notice something that I'm also a little proud of, not excessively so. I'm starting off, there's kind of shame in this thing, which we want to avoid, but the message handler is in a loop. That way, it's a function, it's a subprogram inside a loop that will send this stuff. And that FF func up top function is a formatting thing. So I think I have another page on this one. Yeah, so I'm kind of using some of the same trickery in here of using variables and names of things. Notice I'm using backticks in this thing. I don't like using double quotes, but I can't use single quotes in Golang. So I think I can use backticks like in the bottom left-hand corner instead of double quotes, just to make it cleaner and easier to read. So this is that func main is the main part of the program, and it's calling those other subprograms up top. We could go to the next slide, please. And so here's really the program that's in there, which is, I can't read the file, I get an error, and then I have a for loop to buzz through all of the line items. And you can see,
oops, sorry.
That's all right. You could see the supplier up there and the various records. So I'm getting data like amounts for each invoice, and I'm getting the invoice number. Actually, on this one, I didn't do quite as good a job of clarifying what these fields were. But maybe I will, well, I'm certain I have some tweaks that I'm going to put in the GitHub thing. And if people are using it, I'm happy to send you that, hey, I just updated something in there. But it's kind of the same idea of grabbing that data and kind of cleanly putting it into these fields. You can see in the bottom or in this middle little block, I have that FF for formatting. This stuff is what the F stands for. Next slide, please. And so if the inside the loop, if this supplier is not the same as the last supplier, then send a message. And that's kind of a common database trick. And I'm a little new to using loops inside SQL, but depending on what sort of data we're looking at the prior record, comparing it to this record is kind of a handy technique for chunking through big data. So that first thing, I'm just navigating, hey, am I in the header or am I in the line item? And depending on where I am, after I get the last line item, then send the thing. So I'm just creating a big string with carriage returns. And then down in that bottom box, there's I think what I'm doing with that, I'm certain what I'm doing with that print line at the bottom box is I'm just displaying that on the screen when the bookkeeper runs it, so she can see that, hey, this thing is running. If there were an error, there's a way to show errors, but anyhow. Next slide, please.
I think we're a little bit over time here too. Nope, awesome. Yeah, let's open the floor to some questions here. I'm sure that it's like at least more than one of you got some questions along the way of what we saw here. This good presentation Bill put together. Yeah, Kyle.
Hey, Bill, I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but you can send remittance advices out of Plex, even though you're not sending ACH payments or generating ACH files.
And can I do that in a batch?
Yeah. It's basically you, whatever payment type you have flagged under your payment type table as remittance advice, it will use that same remittance advice functionality. So if you're paying an entire week's worth of payments all in one transaction, it'll send remittance advices and email all those suppliers. And it will give you a list of the suppliers that don't have email set up as well. So something that you might want to think about.
Yeah, that's very cool. So we haven't done any of this yet. It's all checks and they get their remittances. But do you send remittance emails, Kyle, to people that even though they're getting the check already?
No, for checks, that gets printed on the check stubs. But for ACHs, it gets emailed. The remittance advice gets emailed.
Okay, cool. So
it's just a flag on the payment type table. It's a remittance advice. Whatever payment type you have flagged for remittance advice, it'll send emails out as soon as your accounting user pays.
So that's very helpful and excellent, and I think we'll use it. And I won't delete my program that I struggled with, but our bookkeeper probably will want to do that because it's all built in and easier. And yeah. I'm delighted to learn that. So thank you for letting me know, Kyle, and everybody.
Yep, no problem.
All right, anyone else have any other questions for Bill here? All righty, thank you very much, Bill. Alrighty, next up on the shoot is VisionPlex versus Intelliplex. This is with Lisa Knieve with Revolution Group. Oh, I think you're muted there.
Duh. Hello, everybody. Thanks, David. I will go ahead and share my screen here. Oops. Let me get this working. There we go. And I will start my slideshow here. Okay, so the agenda pretty much.
So we can see the presenter view there. Do you have another, maybe a different monitor screen to show there, Lisa?
Let me swap it out. Hold on. Stop sharing. There. That
go
better?
to your display settings there. Let's yeah, swap that one right there. Click the top there. Perfect.
There we go.
All right, as
Thank
you were.
Okay. All right. So as David mentioned, I will be talking about the differences between VisionPlex and Intelliplex and what you might want to use for which purposes. I'm kind of hoping this will be more of a discussion and people asking questions with anything that they might have that's come up. But to start out, I was going to ask a poll question here. Can you give me, by raising your hands, how many people have worked with the SDE previously? Okay. Nice. Okay. And how many people have worked with VisionPlex in Classic? Okay, so about 12 people. And how many have worked with VisionPlex in UX? Woo, lots of people. Nice. Okay. And who has worked with Intelliplex in the 1.0 version? A lot more people. Okay, nice. And what about Intelliplex in 2.0? Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of people here that have worked with both VisionPlex and Intelliplex in the 2.0 version, maybe also in the Intelliplex 1.0 version. So that's great. And what I was going to go over next was the SDE and all of its capabilities. However, Tammy seemed to do a really good job of that. So I might fly through the next slides a little fast, just because I don't want to repeat too much here of what's been going on. But so
I'll just add too that it's also a good time if you guys have any specific questions around the SDE. It's a great time to kind of ask those through here. Keep it as an open discussion format.
Yeah. So here is just a blank version of the SDE. Tammy went over everything already, but here's where you could go to. Details are good, Tammy. So here's where you can pull up any procedures that you or a coworker may have already written. If you need a new query tab, you can have as many tabs open as you want. I myself usually limit one window to just about 3 or 4 tabs, so I don't get confused with what I'm doing. And then here's where you execute. You click execute to run the query. And here's where you can save the query and name it whatever you like. And then you can download it, of course. And the download also, you're able to download an actual explain plan, which is different from an estimated explain plan. So that's really something that I've liked out of the UX in SQL development environment. And then down here, you've got your query. This is where you type everything in. Your results will come up. You can also diagram out. A lot of people will, I missed this one over here. So the databases, you can expand this and you'll see all of the Plex databases. You expand the database you're needing, and it'll give you a list of all of the views available. And when I say views, what Plex does for the SQL development environment, in case you didn't know, is they will, all of the tables, the actual tables in the database, they build views on top of it to make sure that the PCN is restricted and security reasons and all of that. So that's why when you expand this, you'll see part underscore v underscore part instead of part.dbo.part. So the underscore v is just letting you know that it's actually a view. But it's really just a select star from the tables most of the time. There's a few that are a little bit different like a Plexus customer, that is not available to use in the SDE. So they've kind of merged some of the fields from that table into the customer group member table view. So little things like that you might see. I see a question about the download button. This is not new. This was actually in Classic, but you wouldn't see the download until you actually executed and you got your query returned. Execution plan. Execution plans give you an idea of how the performance of the query you've written will perform. So I can go into that a little bit more in detail at the end. Okay. Yes, I will go into more detail at the end about the execution plans. Okay. So what I was about to say here was the diagram. Some people will pull from the tables, they'll pull them into the diagram because they're not sure what to join on. So that's a very good way to determine what fields might actually be used for linking. And then properties shows you the name of the query, if it's used for a VP data source or if it's an IntelliPlex data source, and any parameters that go into the query. That's where you would find them in the properties. So the next, this just shows you
before we move on there, Dan had a good point. So as like certified developers inside of Plex, like partners and professional services, we can take these queries that are written in SDE and then promote them to that production environment through a pretty rigorous process in partnership with professional services. So as partners, like when we take SQL query, either that we have written ourselves or some of our customers may write. We'll conform that to a standard set of Plex programming standards. We'll write a deployment file for that and a test file for that script. And then we'll issue that off to the professional services team with a case to get that deployed. Getting data sources deployed, there's a little bit of a lag between submitting the case to having that real-time data source. From our side, we usually plan 3 to 4 weeks just for the full process to get a data source deployed into production, where there is usually a week of review. Then there is a week of that data source being on test, which runs similarly to what you would have in SDE. And then there is the kind of the week that goes on to the production environment there. And I'll add just one more thing around the execution plans, where we'll try to get an execution plan here before the end of this talking point to go through it a little bit. But essentially the execution plan is what exactly happened at the SQL Server level, like when you run this query to be able to pull data. It is a really, really great thing to use, specifically when you write a query and you're like, man, this is timing out. Why is this timing out all of a sudden? Because I just added this one table to it. There's not much data in there. So how is this timing out? The execution plan that you can download, and Tom's kind of pro tip there is to use SQL Century Plan Explorer, which is a great tool to use that, breaks down each join that the SQL Server processes. It shows you the time, the cost, and really the total effort that server spent processing your request. That's a really, really great thing to do if you're trying to improve the performance, either going from timing out to not timing out or going from like a 15-second runtime to like a sub-second to help you out with that. All right, as you were, Lisa.
Okay. So here is I was just showing what the results would look like if you were to execute. This is select star from the part table. So you can see these were the fields from the part table in an output in a grid format. Then we have, this is the diagram. And then so see, we've got, I pulled part and part attribute out to see what links on it. And when I highlighted the link, this little window pops up over here and tells you, okay, we've got Plexus customer number equals Plexus customer number, and part key equals part key. And there's another one here. You could also do like part key equals part key. So the importance, also, I want to stress that a lot of people don't maybe understand or are fully aware of is this Plexus customer number to Plexus customer number. The reason you want to have these in your joins, even though because of the views that are over the tables, you are limited to the PCN you're currently logged into. The reason you still want to use these is because almost every single index out there, since we're talking about plans and performance stuff, might as well go into this. But just about every index out there starts with the Plexus customer number is equal to the Plexus customer number. So you'll want to make sure to put those in your join clauses to boost up any performance that you might need. And you'll also see sometimes it's not written out fully Plexus customer number. You'll see PCN on the table. That just means the newer tables are PCN and the older tables have Plexus customer number. So that's what that's about.
Bill had a question there. He's asked, why do I never see a diagram? Did you have to drag those out onto that?
Yes, I
that
had to
template there?
highlight. Yeah, I had to highlight the diagram tab and then drag the tables over. And I'll actually show here. This one might make it a little bit more easier. Maybe. Okay, so once I have it on the diagram mode and I pull in, let's do customer information here. Customer. There we go. So I pull and I drag customer over, and then you can pull and drag that anywhere in the map that you want. And then I can pull in customer account. And then when I highlight and click on this link here, or double click the link, that's when you it brings up this the relationships. Well, yes, it would be cool to have an ERD, but the Plex ERD would be a book. Okay, I'm going to turn off the chat for now on my window because I'm getting distracted by it. Shiny objects. Okay. So then the next screen here is where I'm pointing out. You've got all of the parameters for your query, the name of the query, and here's where you can flag it for a VisionPlex data source or an IntelliPlex synonym. Okay. All right. Next up is where I just talk. Yes, yes.
Lisa, can I just add one comment to your point about using the Plexus customer number? When you look at when you do your codes, when you do your coding, it is a good, to Lisa's point, it's a very good practice to always use your Plex customer number or PCN joins in your joins. Not only that it's just a good practice for the indexes, but if you ever add PCNs in the future, you don't have to go back and re-update all your SQL.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you do enterprise queries, if you have an enterprise, the _E in there. So like here, we've got currency exchange type and then currency exchange type _E. What the _E means is that will pull in all your enterprise data. So if you use these tables, you definitely want to make sure you've got PCN in there so that you're not mixing your PCNs with all the data. So good point. Thank you for that, Daniel.
Yeah, the only other question I thought I saw was why PCN versus Plexus customer number. Back in the olden days, they started with Plexus customer number, and then somewhere around the mid 2000s, late 2000s, early 2010s, they switched to PCN. So it's the same field, it's just named different in later tables. That's why the part table has Plexus customer number, and some of the more later tables have PCN, as an example.
Correct. And then you see here, this is actually a good example. The Plexus customer number is matching up to PCN. So that tells you that this customer account table is a newer table and customer table is an older one. So that is that. So let's go into the difference between the two of VisionPlex and IP. So when I think of VisionPlex, I think of data that either I want to use to get to certain Plex screens, or I want to do some kind of modification to this data. those are going to be your key points for VisionPlex. So I've got there think application. IntelliPlex, I think analyzing data, I think charting, I think drilling down into your different data. I think high level dashboards, I think a lot of different things. But we can go through the list here. I've put pros and cons for each. So pros of VisionPlex, you can already use live data sources in VisionPlex. And you can pull Plex data sources if you want into. So like you don't have to write an STE query all the time. You can use a data source if you want, but make sure you know what that data source is doing. So if you were to pull in, I don't know, parts get, that would give you generally from the Plex version of parts get, you might just see a bunch of part data. And that would be it. But you can use Plex data or Plex data sources if you want, and it would be on the live data, the live server. Another pro, what we talked about was you can update data. You can create mass update screens using VisionPlex. You can be used to drill into other areas of the application. So let's say you're building a job screen, but you want to be able to go to the part detail. You can add a hyperlink to do that in VisionPlex. You can also link up your attachments. You can use HTML and flag it for rendering HTML on the screen or in the print. It does display report data in a grid format. And it has a wide range of customizing using styling and JavaScript expressions. So you can conditionally bold things, conditionally color things. You can use data and expressions to make other calculations in VisionPlex. You can also make filters dependent on each other in VisionPlex. Let's say you've got a work center group filter and a work center filter. If they choose the production work center group, it will only return work centers in the production work center group. And you can have multiple grids on one report, and each grid can have its own data source. So those are the most significant pros that I could think of for VisionPlex. Cons of it, the charting in it is going to be, it's not as nice as IntelliPlex. I will say that, but there are charting capabilities, but they are not as nice. And creating print-worthy documents is not the best in VisionPlex, but we have, I know Devin, I think, is going to talk about something maybe a little bit later. So that's VisionPlex.
Looks like you had your hand up there, Dan.
Oh, I was just going to mention the con, and Lisa has it on the pros on the IP side, is you currently cannot schedule VisionPlex reports to be emailed. But that's on the pro on the IntelliPlex side.
Yeah, VisionPlex, I didn't even think of that. The con is you can't schedule it, the VisionPlex screen, and you can't really schedule it to an output email. So, okay, IntelliPlex 2.0. Some of the pros there, it has got amazing charting capabilities. It also has access to the data stars, which can give you the ability to see a trend over a period of time. The IntelliPlex can be scheduled to run whenever you need in off hours or during work hours, and it can be emailed. You can also have the email burst. It's called bursting, report bursting, which if you've got, I don't know, an HR report where you only want the operations manager to get operation employees and quality people to quality manager to get the quality information, you can it bursts it out, and you can the same report will be emailed to 2 different people with different data. You can also use reports. You can create reports that use outside data via files in FTP. You can load them up to the report. And you can create custom folders with security to restrict access where needed. So if you've got accounting reports, you would want to put that under an accounting folder and only allow people with the accounting, in the accounting department access to that folder. Cons for IntelliPlex. Currently, we're not able to look at live data sources. And I say currently because that is coming for IntelliPlex. At some point this year, they're still working out the details and kinks and everything, but currently we're not able to, but they're going to start with production data. Or I think that's what I was told, that they would start with production data. And another thing for IntelliPlex, a con, is you cannot update or insert data. So those are the pros and cons that I could think of. Are there other questions about anything on that list? Let me go back to the chat and see what's going on. Okay, is there any good documentation on permitted JavaScript functions? There is not. But if you can get it to run in a JavaScript format, you most likely are going to be able to get it to run within the expression in VisionPlex. Yes. Okay. Scott Tolafield, database table column info. Does that exist in UX? It does. I use it all the time. If you go to menu and type in data, you will see database table information. You go there, and here's where you can put in part key, and it will give you a list of all your database and tables for part key. I think David's been keeping on top of answering most of your questions, so I'm trying to hit out.
Yeah, the database screen, that's well worth showing there. There's some hidden gems there to write some more performance SQL.
Yes.
To show them where you can see where the index values are at. And
so if you go to the databases screen, you can drill into each database in particular that you need to get into. They've got all of them listed here. I'll go to the part database, and I want to look at the part table to see what indexes they have on the part table. So if you scroll till you get to the part table and you click on that, and something new that they've added to this that I asked for, yay, thank you Plex for doing, is they added the numeric. So in a varchar, you now know how long it is, so that when you get the truncation error messages, you now know, oh, this is only 100 characters. I need to shorten it. Or the precision on a numeric one for, let's see if I can find a one that's not a key value. Okay, approval quantity. So this one is a decimal of 10 and no decimal places after it. So this gives you all of that information. But if you look at this table here, it gives you so much information. It tells you all of the fields that are on this part table, what type of data they are. And then here's the length that I was so happy about. If there is a default, so part number actually is not going to be required, but it will default if you don't put anything into it. It will default to an empty string here. That's what this is. When you see two quote marks like this, this is what we call an empty string. So it's not allowing a null, but it will allow an empty string. Then over here, you've got identity. So we know that part key here is going to be a part of the primary key here because it's got this identity in its makeup of the field. And then here tells you exactly what else is with the primary key. And notice here, Plexus customer number is part of the primary key. And Plexus customer number is a foreign key to the Plexus customer table. So this gives you all kinds of information and tells you, okay, this field right here is also a foreign key. So there is a part type table out there. Part group table has the integer, the key integer there. So this is actually, it should be flagged as a foreign key too, but so this gives you all the information that you would need on any of the fields. And if you keep scrolling down,
the good stuff is at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah. After the variables section, you get the index detail and the constraints. So first the index. So each index is listed here and it tells you the column names that are in them. So when you're running a query and you're running it on the part number instead of the part key, then it might use this index. And so you may need to pull in where the revision into the query somehow, either just add it as like a is not null or something, just to be sure to add it to this index. But you can see what fields are indexed here. So part status, part type is indexed, has its own, and then you can see what are grouped together. So here we've got part key, part number, name, revision, and part type is all in this one index. We've got part key and grade up here. This one is interesting. Remember I said in almost all indexes, it starts with the Plexus customer number. This one actually does not have a PCN or Plexus customer number in it. So, but it does have part key, type, group, grade, and temper. So it just depends on what you're querying for, on what index you might be trying to hit. And everything. The constraints will tell you all of the defaults that are there on each one. So like here, the default is 0 for MRB breakpoint and all of that. And this is more informational. It's not going to help you for building your query or anything. this section right here, the index section, is what you really want to be looking for if you're performance tuning. Any other questions? Anything that came up? Let me see new messages down below. Okay, star indexes are not live. They get refreshed at midnight in the PCN's time zone every day. So that's the type of data that you got there. It's actually thinking. Let's see. Okay. Oh, to the table detail, I went to just databases. Let me go back. So here I'm just on the databases screen, and I drilled down into the part database, and then I drilled down into the part table. Which is, I'll keep scrolling. Here we go. And then I clicked on the part table. Can others see that? Oh, you don't see the character max. That might be.
It's a fun thing. It's actually a VP screen, the screen. So if you want to, that column is in the data source. If you want to enable it, you can do a checkout in your PCN, and then you can enable that max character length there.
When I saw that they had added it to the data source, I just started pulling them over, and I pulled these over into the data source, so, or into the table. So, and I did that at an enterprise level. So, because we don't own the screen, but okay. Is there any way to filter a custom via a custom field value or lack of a value on a custom field? So, okay, custom fields. Let me go back to SDE. Okay, so if I had a, let me think, okay, so I've got this query here where I'm pulling containers that are on hold. If, like Tammy showed earlier, if you click on the data source, if we had part key, so here I would want to associate it with the part standard object. And then that is the way that you can pull in any oh my goodness, I'm losing my train of thought. That's the way you can pull in any custom fields on that. And from that, you can display any custom fields. So I'll actually hit OK on this. And yes. And then I have this containers on hold VisionPlex screen. And I could on here, we have a few custom object. Hold on. Tammy, might need your help on this because I'm not seeing.
Did you?
I did save it. I did flag it, right? Yeah.
You may need to refresh your VP screen there. But anyways, his question
That's
was
right.
If you can filter the SQL based on the custom field.
Yeah. So here,
Should be the bottom there.
down
Yeah, there you
here,
go.
like all of these part bool, all of these are custom object, and it says right here, custom field. You can just click on it and drag it and drop it onto the screen if you want. Any of these fields. And then if you want to add, let's say you want to add a picker for here, data, set data source. I am going to set it to just the one for here, and then add in, set the set that up. And then I can say, why am I not seeing in here the custom fields?
Yeah, I think the answer Scott's question. I don't believe you can do that at this time.
Oh, can't yet. Okay, sorry. Okay, so I'll get rid of this for now, but that's maybe something hopefully in the future, maybe that we can do. Okay, so let me go back to my thing here. Okay, so what I was going to do next, sorry.
I think Devin dropped off for a little bit. He should be back on at noon here.
Okay.
He had another time constraint there.
Okay. Then from here, I use the same exact SQL query to create a VisionPlex screen and an IntelliPlex report so that you can kind of see the difference between the two and what you might get out of them. And so I did the containers on hold query. And this is what you can do. So you can conditionally color things if you wanted. Or just flat out color subtotals, for example. You can add your hyperlink here to a part or a container detail. It shows all of the data that you want. It allows you to use the pickers and all of that. And then as Tammy showed, I don't see why you would ever not flag the print and export buttons when creating a VisionPlex screen, but that's me. And then you can also update. So if I were to flag this first record here and say I wanted a different status instead of, well, I don't have the status currently displaying on here, but if I wanted to change the status of this, I could, and I could do multiple records. You can get the multiple records from here in the VisionPlex Designer by on the grid down below, allow the user to multi-select. Or single select, or just you pass in the records that were modified. But this is a good example of a VisionPlex report or a VisionPlex application that can update and modify data. Next up is the VisionPlex capabilities. So again, here, you can drill into the part detail. You can have it open in the same screen, or I have this one opening in a new tab. But it takes me directly to the part detail screen. And from there, I can, from there, I can see any field or any data on the part that I need. Here was me showing that I had updated the container status to rework. I have the new status up here so that it can be a mass update. We want any record that is flagged is the new status is going to be reworked. So that is, and here I'm showing the container detail where this did get updated to rework. Okay, IntelliPlex. So here are some examples of reports in IntelliPlex or charting in IntelliPlex. Again, I'm using the exact same query. Notice that here I had several filters that the user can interact with, but in IntelliPlex, I can allow the user not to have to click on any or input anything, or I could actually add a filter. Like up here, you'll see drop a filter or a field here. So I could allow the user to say, oh, I want to do this, or I can just say, these are all the containers on hold no matter what. And these are the different, just a handful of different charts that are available here in IntelliPlex. You can add coloring so that it's easier to see what is what here, especially like on a pie chart, you really want coloring there. This is what they call a tree map, which is new to me or was new to me. And how this operates, in case it's new to you, the biggest number is going to be in the upper left corner, and the smallest number is going to be in the bottom right. So it's coming down this way. And that's why we've got Pinnacle Manufacturing here, and then Acme, and then Production, and then Warehouse. So these are all the locations and everything. And in IntelliPlex, you can add drill down capability, which we'll go into here in a minute, but you can also have just a grid output of the same data. So here is an example of that. If you like this a little bit better than what you saw on the VisionPlex report, you can do it in IntelliPlex just as easily. So those are the examples of IntelliPlex. And then here is an example of where you can drill down. And depending on what kind of drill down you do, you can continue drilling down and drilling down and drilling down. So right now, this is building code. I could drill down into operation type, then I could drill down into operation code, then I could drill down into part number maybe. It just depends on how you set the drill down capabilities, but you can definitely drill down. You can also, this is an example of, I had scheduled this this report to be emailed to me. So here is the email that you would see. And I forgot to put in a message here, so that's why it's all blank there. But you can add a message in your email saying, here are your daily containers on hold, or whatever kind of message you would want to put in there. You can also now run the IntelliPlex report without leaving Plex. You see here, I am still within the Plex application, not IntelliPlex, but I have the report here, and I still have my drill down capability. So that's something new that I'm really liking. I'm really liking IP 2.0 a lot, actually. I've been spending the last couple of weeks getting to know IP 2.0, and it's pretty cool, I have to say. Okay, and that is all I had for a slideshow. I was hoping to have time left over for any questions or real world situations on if you guys wanted to talk about real world situation that you wanted to know about, or a difference between classic and UX. Or, oh, I'm sorry, I've almost forgot. You all wanted to see an explain plan. I was going to do that here. Okay, so here I am just going to download, and this is another thing about the SDE in UX. You can actually download without having to execute. I can make changes here and then hit download the plan, and it'll download without any problem. So here it's going to download a plan for me based on the user not entering any data whatsoever, because I left all of these blank. And then here I will open up my explain plan. And please note that what it defaults to open into is the SQL Sentry Plan Explorer that Tom mentioned in the chat. It is a much nicer application than the standard
SSMS.
Yes, thank you. So here is what we're seeing, and it'll tell you here, this is the first column I always look at, duration. That's how long it ran. And this is measured in milliseconds. Okay, so this isn't even a second long. It also tells you how much CPU is used, how many reads and writes are done. Estimated rows versus actual rows is something you want to keep a lookout on. And you want to try to get rid of any RID lookups if you can. So having 0, that's a good thing. But then down here, this gives you the actual diagram that was generated by the SQL optimizer. And you can look over here, and the reason I like SQL Sentry Explorer is it highlights in red where most of your time is spent, where most of the processing is spent. But it shows you here, okay, it's spent on an index seek. That's a pretty good thing. This is a clustered index seek. And this is where we're saying, this is why we were mentioning the indexing. We want to see, I don't think you can do anything better than a clustered index seek when looking up data. And then going to an index seek, and then coming down here, you're just adding in the tables and everything, and doing a join on those tables. And here tells you, this red 204 tells you how many records are being returned. And also something that's very cool about this application, and let me see if I can find one in here. Let's see what this one does. So also, if your Sprock has more than one actual SQL statement, it lists the statements out separately. So here is, I'm just doing looking a lookup for the Plexus user number. Here is the actual query for the report. And so here you'll see I've got a lot of little things here highlighted that are 3.6% is what it's taking this to do this for this whole entire query. This is not giving me what I was hoping to show. Let me see if I can find something else. Okay, here I have got a lot of different statements in this Sprock. Okay, here. So this is another reason why I like SQL Sentry Explorer. See how this line is thicker? You can tell right there that this has a lot more data than, say, over here. So this line represents 335 records. This line represents 437,938 records. So it gives you at a very quick glance what you need to look for, what you need to try and dig into if you can see a different way of getting the data. It also gives you different ways of looking at that plan tree coming down here. If you more of a not if you like looking at records more than diagrams, this plan tree might be better for you, and it gives you the actual rows, estimated rows. I typically don't care anything at all about estimated costs or at all. I don't even look at these columns. It gives you the top operations down here, the query columns, the join diagram, any parameters that were used, expressions where I'm doing my either implicit expressions where it's converting them to varchar here where I'm concatenating, or if it is explicit where I'm saying, no, this is going to be this type of a field. So it gives you all kinds of data. It also even gives you the text data, which I typically hide because I have the text data up on the STE. But here, if you highlight this, you can see what the plan will be for that. You can also see text data. If I click on that, it switches to this row, so you can see very specifically in your code what statement is actually giving you more of your issues. Okay. Any questions about that? And I see Tom and Will put in the chat a link to this this download, and so that y'all, if you want, you can install it. It is free. They do have a free version, which is what I'm using to have all of this. So
if you like, if you guys would like, we'd be happy to do like a webinar just on this topic, like SQL Sentry Plan Explorer, around like SQL query optimization.
Yeah, we could do a whole day on that.
All right, thank you very much, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
All righty. So Bill almost, I purposely did not answer your question there, Bill. So Bill's question was, it's probably a good introduction to my presentation here, is how can we do an update in VP if all we can see is report server data? So I just recommend sit down, buckle up. We're going to go through that, how you can do that with data sources that are available to you today. So we're going to be building a native Plex application. And this is me, David Chubb, Revolution Group. So what are we building today? So we're building a new parts list. And I didn't build out the full parts list. I just built out the ability to update data with a modal, which is pretty nice, specifically if you're working in from a list, you want to quickly update data and see the result as you're going through the list. And we're going to use customer-facing data sources that you can use right now. All right, so the first thing we're going to build is the part list. And from our application side of things, this is going to be like our display of the information that we're going to be acting on. So before you begin your screen, we need to go fishing a little bit for a data source we want to use as like the basis of our application to display information back So what I want to find is a list of parts. Okay. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is go into here into the module group, put engineering. Second thing, parts list. That's probably a good start. And then I'm going to filter it, the data source name with my little percents for some fuzzy filtering on parts. And here's just a small selection of all of the data sources that came back here, just to show you. Kind of one thing in our advantage was way back in Classic, there was a version of the parts list that was made in VP. So I'm going to reuse that data source that was existing in Classic. It's called parts VisionPlex get, which that's a pretty good indicator that this will return information back for me to do something with it. So here's our data source. I listed just a small kind of snippet of it where there was like 26 different fields that'll show up here with a bunch of input parameters, which will be our spot to be able to filter on for our parts list screen. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go see the wizard, the VisionPlex wizard that is. We're going to select grid. It's a good starting place for that first initial screen to display information here. From the grid, we're going to select stored procedure. And we're going to put in our data source of this parts VisionPlex get. And I selected just a small subset of what I wanted to be able to filter this screen by, right? I wanted to have a part picker, part status, part type, whether it's active or not, maybe a customer part picker, part group, and a part number, if I wanted to do any type of like fuzzy matching in here. So we've got our data selected there. And for outputs, I don't really know what I want for the screen yet, at least at this point. And I just selected that full list of outputs. If you have the exact idea of what you want on the screen here, please save yourself some headache further down the line and just select which columns that you want to eliminate some of the column deletions in VP. There's a few clicks involved with that, and there's the delete click, then the confirm click, and those add up depending on how big of a data source you got. I skipped through that a little bit quick just because the wizard, if you look behind the curtain, it's going to take us to the VP screen there. But anyways, I went through that. I didn't select anything for summary. I didn't select anything for action. And I named the application something pretty boring. Demo part list or parts list. So out of the gate, right, we've got all of our inputs for the data source we've selected. I've got my grid here of this data. I'm going to go through here and delete some of the grid columns that I don't want. I'm going to go through and I'm going to set up my pickers. So I'm not going to go into great detail, as I think that Lisa and both Tammy did a great job of that. But here are all of the pickers that I used with the data source names. Here's that kind of data source there for the main grid down there. And that you set up these just like you would any other, like even it's like an SDE data source, right? You set the picker is the same. Even the wire up is going to be the same. Here's just like one of the pickers here. You can see where this is the parts type picker. This part type picker, it is based on the actual part type and not necessarily the part type key. Just to show you that I have it set up in the value and the display text there. And this up here is for the grid kind of data wire up here. I selected that data source for the grid, went to the data, and I am selecting all of my pickers for the grid here for our all the pickers that we set up. Notice a lot of these are not used, which is okay, depending on the data source. All right, so here's kind of our basic screen here, which I'll show you what this looks like. Right here, I'm going to switch into a parts list here. So I can look at all of my production parts. And here's my screen. I've got a couple things in here just displayed, and I should have probably hid them, but I didn't. But anyways, like this looks exactly like a like one of your SDE reports, because really it functionally is, except for it's using that real-time data source. Notice that we have these in blue here, which I'll show you how to wire these up here in just a second. But really it's really your functional parts list screen. If you want to filter on a part, great, we filter on a part. You've got the full options there for filtering, like how you'd expect to see on a VP screen. And nothing new and surprising there. All right. So to add a navigation link here, which we're going to add a navigation link to a screen that doesn't exist yet, just to show you. So I selected this little part number, which is the data label. And I selected in here actions, expression action, which in the chat earlier, we were talking about JavaScript and what you can do there. The JavaScript that we were talking about is primarily in this expression action or is like an expression column in VP. Really anything else, let's kind of throw back to Ali Baidoon. A lot of that was stripped out for security reasons, as it should have been, as it was pretty wide open there. But anyways, I'm going to go on to this expression action here. And the expression action, you need to select a bound section, which really is your data source input into this action. So our grid here, right, that's where we're going to have fun things like part key. If we want to update a part, well, really the only thing we need to know is the part key so that we can look up the part and update it. So let's select grid there. And let me just go back a little bit. And then once I selected grid, I selected this little puzzle piece, which that's a little small. So let's go look at that. Okay, trends. There we go. That's a little better. And did I actually give me that? Yeah, that's probably better. All right, so that expression here, it's really, you saw how I went into there on the action. I just like the little puzzle piece there. Took me here. This is a little blown up a little bit. So this is our little bit of like our JavaScript expression. So this JavaScript expression is really like an API call to do navigate instead of the Plex platform. So to break this down, you actually don't want to have this data in here inside of the parentheses here, like screen key. So this is the actual VisionPlex screen key that we want to go to. I called another like JavaScript expression here, this record.get, and I called out the column name. This pulls up that exact row's part key, which is why I left it on there for the discussion today. And then like this second like input parameter, you can see it kind of delimited by the commas here and here. You can see it delimited. This is the screen parameter of what I'm going to be navigating to. you can select a page mode, which if you get into like deeper into VisionPlex, you can have columns or pickers or form elements either display or not display depending on the page mode that you open it, because it could be a normal, could be an update. I like to keep ads and updates as two separate screens just to keep it cleaner in my head. Anyway, so we've got this page normal. We've got an auto search, which essentially just means, well, when this page loads, I want it to automatically search and bring me back the values based on this screen parameter, or no screen parameter if you didn't set anything. This next thing here is new window false, which if this were true, you would have like this link click and it open up a new tab in your browser, which depending on the type of screen that you're building, maybe that's something you really want to do, where you go and select 50 records, whether you're doing that by hand or you're having like an RPA bot do that. If you have that as true, you'd want this modal to be false, really. They kind of fight each other there. Okay, so I'm going to show you now like the part form side of things. So this is another VP screen, and I'm sure you've guessed it. We're going back to the wizard. So I'm going to select here form. The form's a little bit tricky the first time you use it, as early when you come to the form, this is where I would just want to skip past the wizard. I know it's just a guy in a megaphone and like a projector screen behind him. I just want to go to the VP screen. So I'm going to click form. I'm going to, oops, looks like I forgot to do my get there, my screenshot. Apologies for that. But anyways, I selected in there. There was a part get to, which I used as my data source there for my live part information get. And then for the select, the update, delete, this is where I say, okay, wizard, I'm really wanting to skip past you there. I'm just going to click all the way through those. I'm going to set my application and a form name. I called this another really boring name, demo part form. I put it in the engineering module, or I guess Revolution internal module, so people wouldn't, outside people wouldn't see it, because it's just demo. And then here's my part form that came up, right? I have this form here, which I'm going to switch over to in just a second here. But I've got this form here of this details for this part screen. And it gave me my data inputs as I selected on that part get to form there, where it brought me my part number, my revision, my name, my part status, my part type. Just for sake of time here, I did wire those up to a filter there. And this works just like your grids in VP, right? You can link it to this form field here. And we'll get into the difference in just a second, because there's a little bit beyond that that's required to bring in data into this form, more than just the picker. Okay, looks like my slide was in disorder, but here's the data source we used here, this part get to. All right, so odd thing with the forms here is like when you first pulled in and you run the screen, you're not going to return any data actually to the screen, right? You need to set an initial value to this form that you have. So I have a screen parameter, which I'll show you just a little bit where I set that. But I went through each of these fields here. I used my data source on the initial value. I wired it up to my screen parameter of part key. And that is going to bring that initial value into the form as you come to the form. Okay. All right, I'm going to switch back to Plex here. I'll go into my part form, and it probably is going to error. I should have gone into the design mode. Okay, awesome, it took me there. All right, so I just want to show you again on the initial fields here. Each one of these, right, I have this part get to here, where I'm setting the initial value. And we're even on here where I have the picker here set up, I've got the data source. Well, it has below here the initial value here for us to be able to pull that part get to in there. Same thing with the part type. It's kind of the exact same, other than I used the initial value of the parts picker get 3. Because that's the only different one there. And I gave it the part key just to show you that you don't just have to use one data source. If you want to have a different data source for each form element, there's probably going to be some performance implications to that, but you can. And I linked it to my screen parameter again, just to show you I can pull back a parts picker 3 and return my part type here. Okay. I added a screen parameter to this screen here. Really, I click this view screen information, and just so you know, when you add a screen parameter, you have added a screen parameter, and there is no delete here. So be very careful as you go through and add screen parameters, because you cannot get rid of them once they're there. Notice I can't even change the name of it. There's no trash can. There's no row level highlighting here. But I added this as the part key for a screen parameter coming into there. I got the database type as int. It's required because, right, we're going to use this to look up a part, and we're not going to use it any other way. And I don't need any other screen parameters. If I step back just a little bit, this is the screen parameter that I'm referencing here. And that was the new VP screen that I created with the key here to navigate to it. Just so there's no magic here. Here's the VP screen that I created to go to. Here's the exact spelling of that screen parameter. And that is very, very important for it to be, it's case sensitive. Just make it match exactly. All right, so the next thing I want to talk to you about is the update side of things. So I'm going to go through here a little bit. So I added the update here, just like how you would add any other action. So I went here, add action. That would create me this default. I really went into the default and I renamed it to update. Just it being update, it doesn't really do anything. I would need to select my linked source, which is kind of the same thing as we saw in our expression action on the grid side, that you need to set its data where it can pull information from for the action. So I went to here, and then I went to actions, and then I added an execute data source action, which let me show you here. So action, I just selected execute data source action. From here, I'll go back to my update here. I selected it's like one of my favorite data sources there. Really, if it's anything related to the part, chances are you can update it with this data source. It's part and attribute add update. I click into it. This works just like your pickers, just like your grid or your form element earlier. We've got like the first thing we need to do is add wire up input parameters. Works just the same as those pickers. So coming through here, I've got my part number. Great. That looks just like our picker elements that Tammy and Lisa went through. I got my revision. Great. I've got my part name, my part type, my part status. I have part group on here. I have my note in here. And that's all. The only thing I really wanted to update on this screen here. Okay. Now, you can do more than just executing like a data source, right? Usually when you execute a data source, that's not the last thing you want to do, is you want to navigate back to the screen you're at, or maybe you want to execute a second data source because you're doing a mass update where you're updating the part, the routing, the BOM, as an example, that you could be using a grid MVP for. To do that, right, I'm going to go back to my default here just so you can see how you chain your actions together, which you can keep chaining until the cows come home. Depending on how many things you're doing at one time, just keep in mind this is running in your browser there, and you don't really want it to do like 1,000 things at one time. Specifically, if you have 1,000 rows and 10 actions per row, it's just asking for the screen to lock up. But anyway, so let's just assume I select a data source here for my default button. And then there is this post action here. Choosing that, it brings you to that full list of actions that we can do there. If you had like that screen that Lisa had for like updating the, I believe it was the container status, chances are you'd probably want the next action to be a refresh to pull that data in. We can print labels from here. We can do the mass updates. I've not personally done the email piece of it here. But it does give the option to be able to do some of that stuff from here. All right, I'm going to click out of here. Let's go back to our example here. So my action here, I've got my data source, right? I've got all my wire ups done with it. And then my post action here, I've got a navigation back to my demo parts list. And that's all I really wanted to do. I wanted us to go into the part, update it, and then take me back to really refresh that data. Because I chose to do a modal, I cannot use this VisionPlex screen to refresh the data behind it. So I've got to do that navigate back. Right, so let's see what this thing looks like. I've got my parts list here. One of my favorite parts of ours is an FGL. I'm going to search on that. And I'm going to come into here and I'm going to click on the part number. Okay, here's my modal pop-up that we had. If this were another screen here, you would see that part key up here in the URL box. Since this is the modal, it's kind of hidden away from us. But I can come into here and I can update. If you're an Ohio State fan, you can tell I'm not from the way I said that, but you could say the finished good left update. Took me back here. You can see the finished good left. And really that's the main action. So it did that data source execution of calling that part in attributes add update. And it returned me right to my screen, which I think you'd kind of expect to see that. Because the prototype. Oop, and it's not active, so we got to click that checkbox. Oop, and we got to refilter. And I'm gonna update this back to production as I don't lose my favorite part. Anyways, like you can see that fully function there. Now to kind of go beyond this, right? You saw how we did this as an expression box to take us to this VP screen. You can go further, which is out of the scope of this presentation here. But you can go further by going into this grid here. You can imagine if you did an action and coming in here, add part, you could build out another VP screen that has all of the information you want to add on this part in one go. We've made a few screens for customers where they add, they've got pretty simple products. They add the part, the routing, the BOM in one go. And you can make that kind of that multi-tiered application by adding those 3 distinct columns, by chaining your actions together and adding your part, adding your routing, adding your BOM. And as long as you've got your forms built out, you can accomplish this all in VP with like customer accessible data sources, which I think is the huge thing there. All right, we went through all this here. All right. I'm going to turn this over to you guys and gals, folks, if you will. What questions do you have from what I went through today? Yes, Scott.
I was wondering what's the best way to know which data sources allow you to update 1 or 2 of the 10 or 20 fields it has hooked to it. A lot of times you got to pass the current values in order to keep it from changing those.
That is a good question, which I think that you always begin with starting in test and figuring out what the data source actually does. In Classic, you have access to the SQL code around it, but if you're in UX, you do not. So the best way to do that is to wire up a data source, execute it, see what action it has. But if you're like, let's give an example here for like parts. Like, let's look at a part. I want to update, and this is exactly how I look. Oop, and I'm not showing you my screen, so I know you guys have active imaginations, but hoping not this active. So I went to this data sources screen here, and I typed in here part %update. And then the next thing I'm going to go into is this input name. And let's say we've got something kind of not common. Let's say temper. Do you have anything for temper? Okay. And my favorite part data source, we can see it here. I go into the details here, and I can see here when we've got our temper as an input value. But really, if that's really the secret sauce of how to go through and find something that allows you to go through and update that value is, number one, find it with the data sources screen with the input, with this type of search for the update, and then try it and test. If that still does not work for you, and you have, let's say, a really important problem to solve, you've got a couple avenues to have a data source created for you if it is really, really important for you guys. Number one, which as a partner, I'm saying this is number one, Plex partners that are developers, like Revolution Group, we can create you a data source to your exact specification for the update you want to do, or you can go to option 2, which is Plex Professional Services, and as well they can create a data source for you that you'd be able to use inside of VisionPlex here, if you can't find anything there. All righty, next question, Siram.
Yes, hi David. So I have one question like, so there are several data sources, but not all the data sources can be used in VisionPlex grids. So how to identify which data source can be used in the VisionPlex grid without going from the VisionPlex grid?
I really would encourage you to stay on this data source screen here and then just try searching for that value in here, because this is going to tell you whether you have a data source to even search for inside of VisionPlex. And if, like, for example, if this data source here was not available inside of VisionPlex, you can create a ticket to support to ask for this to be enabled for VisionPlex, like if this is not available for you to use. There is quite a process they go through there. They don't just turn it on if it's not already in VisionPlex. They go through a security review usually to make sure that it doesn't have any unintended consequences of turning it on. Some of the classic data sources that were migrated, there's not what I would call guardrails in the data source, and you could have pretty easy unintended consequences of using it. Like I said, I would start here and then go to your VisionPlex screen and see if you can get that data source to come up. If you can't, your only route is to put a case into support to the application integration team there and ask them to turn it on. And I would expect to wait a little bit, as they do need to do their due diligence there and make sure that it doesn't have any security issues with enabling it for VP.
Yeah, that's what we are doing. The same thing, but just wanted to know if it is possible to check it from the data source screen itself. Okay. If it's not there, okay.
Yeah, it's not. I don't believe it's here. Yeah, it's not displayed on the screen here. But there is something like behind the scenes at Plex that allows the data source to be. I don't want to oversimplify it, but there's some check boxes on the data source that allow you to use it as a VP filter or a data source or an action data source. There are some things that can be turned on there through support, but it is not exposed to the screen here. That's correct.
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
You're welcome. All right, Mika.
Hey, so when I create a navigation and I have a custom VisionPlex report going to a standard or Plex written VisionPlex report, in my case, the Workcenter productivity report, is there a certain way that I can tell which parameters I need to be using? Because on the VisionPlex screen, it's like end date without an underscore, but in the data source, it's end underscore date.
Yeah, so the best way to do that, which screen you said that was the part?
This was Workcenter Workcenter productivity, which is screen action 7582.
There it is. All right, so I would click into this Workcenter productivity screen here. It's going to take you to the designer, and then I'd select view screen information here. This is going to show you all of the screen parameters are available. This one doesn't have any. So you want to be able to navigate and have it filter automatically here because there's no inputs to the screen.
Okay, so then would the correct way to do this would be to create my own VisionPlex screen using the data source behind this?
Yes, and you can see that by clicking on the grid here, data, and then you can see that, and you'd be able to create your own screen here and add your own parameters.
Okay.
All right, so Ram, I think you have another question there.
Yes, David Vignesh here again. Just one more confirmation. So consider I have a VisionPlex screen with 2 different grids. Okay. So and I can do the calculated column against the grid 1 for the grid 1. But is it possible to do for the computed calculation in grid 2 with the data from grid 1? Is it possible with that way?
I don't believe it is. Usually with how we handle that here is we will use we'll call that data source like in through Query Writer or SDE, if you will, and we'll do that calculation based on your parameters and just calculate that in the SQL behind this report. It doesn't help you necessarily when it is a live production data source here.
Yeah.
But if you really want to do that calculation, it's got to be done. Really got to be done in SQL if you want to bridge those 2 grids there.
Yeah. So, but is it possible? Because I was trying, but I could not able to get this one.
Yeah, if you want to reference grid 1 to grid 2 here,
Yep.
you have to do it in SQL, and you can't reference like grid 2
Okay.
here. Yeah. Just
Okay.
because this element here, so you can see this dotted line here, this
Yeah.
kind of acts as its own little island.
Yes.
And I think that there is some new things coming out that you may be interested in. I think this is probably a good segue over to Devin here. There's some new functionality with VP that allows you to have multi-grids or multi-forms that allow you to reach across. And I think without
Do we want
further
to?
ado, let's
All right. You saved me for last, which means I get to claim that I'm the grand finale, right?
yeah.
So I am going to give me 1 second. I am going to share in that way that you can't all skip ahead, on the slides on your own. Gotta prevent you from doing that. Okay.
You don't want to spoil it.
That's right. That's not the right view. You know what? We're going to spoil it. It's fine. I'll just politely ask you to not skip ahead. And I hope there's nobody who can't see the slides. Okay, so hello, everybody. I am Devin Burke. I'll introduce myself properly in just a moment, but I'm going to, we only have 30 minutes here, and I want to leave time for Q&A, so I'll try to get through this in like 15 minutes. I am the group product manager for platform and now analytics and security, and then throw integrations and stuff like that in there. Since I've been here, I've been sort of the lead on Plex Extend, of which VisionPlex is part. That custom field stuff that Tammy was showing earlier is part of it, but I have a bunch of new forthcoming, super exciting things that really segue out of what David was just going over to go over with you right now. So before I can go any further, I have to give you all this disclaimer. I'm about to talk about future stuff, and the future might turn out differently than I'm about to describe it as, right? So safe harbor, no guarantees that it's going to turn out at all, or that it's going to turn out exactly as I describe it. All right, so just in case you don't really know me, so like I said, I'm the group product manager for the platform aspect of Plex. I've been here for somewhere between 2 and 2.5 years. Prior to that, I was one of you. I was the IT director at a automotive manufacturer using Plex since 2012. So all of the exciting things that you are trying to do, have tried to do, all of the suggestions that you have been making, like, I understand. And yeah, so I bring with me like that customer perspective, which is awesome because I'm leading this Plex Extend initiative, which is all about adding flexibility to Plex. Just in case you don't know anything about Plex Extend, I'll summarize real fast, and then I'll lead directly into the VisionPlex related material. So Plex Extend is like an internal initiative we've had since I've joined in 2022, going on adding different, I don't want to say customization, but like flexibility, extensibility, tailoring kind of capabilities to Plex in various areas to help you meet all of those needs you can't quite meet out of the box. So Plex might cover like 95% of it out of the box, right? But what about that other 5%? So that's where Plex Extend comes in. And for the most part, it's divided into 3 pillars. So that first pillar, which is the first one that came out, data extensions that consist of like custom fields and custom objects, which we haven't talked about today, but I'm about to talk about at length. Process flows, which kind of is something that came out at the end of last year. It's a visual, I don't want to say workflow because that's a loaded term with Plex, but like visual process and logic builder that sort of orchestrates Plex internal processes. I'm not going to speak about that one too much, but if you don't know what I'm talking about, like go in the community and search for process flows, the release announcement, because it's super cool and super powerful and super techie if you like techie stuff. And then the third pillar, which is the one I'm really going to speak to, is composable apps. There's multiple things that go into this third pillar, but one of them is making your own custom applications within VisionPlex. So that's the one I'm really going to speak to here. So we already released this capability, I don't know, I think it's like 9 months ago or so, to make custom objects. So if you're not familiar with it, if you think of custom fields as like adding more columns to an existing like Plex table, then custom objects is like creating new tables out of thin air in the background. It's literally you creating your own entity, adding whatever fields you want to it, even those fields like linking to other things, whether that's like a standard object or like table or another custom object. So you've had this ability to build like tiered data models, like header and lines, whatever you want to do. But for the most part, the usage has been limited to creating like custom setup tables for custom fields, or maybe things you're using with just APIs. You haven't really, to now, been able to like take this and create your own user interfaces and user experience around them, which is really like what you would need to create your own new applications for things Plex doesn't have out of the box. So just to like get you thinking about, in case you're not familiar with custom objects, get you thinking about like what a custom object might be. Could be something like you're adding new records, a new type of data that's really just sort of, let's say, context to standard Plex data, right? So performance snapshots like OEE at a certain moment in time attached to a work center, or I don't know, if you have safety inspections that you don't track through any other module in Plex and you're attributing it to a work center, like some kind of record that's really just sort of a log of things going on against, you know, a major Plex object like a work center or a part. Could be something like linking to unrelated things in Plex together. I think actually customer releases and purchasing releases can be linked together, so it's not a perfect example, but use your imagination. Linking a part to an employee, I don't know why you do that. Well, engineer, never mind. Or third category, which is really the one I want to emphasize, like new applications, like a new thing that doesn't have a place inside of Plex. So the example I have on screen here, like an ocean freight booking, which incidentally was a thing in Classic, didn't make it over to UX. So it's a pretty good example. Something that kind of is really specific to a certain industry or a certain way of doing business, right? Only if you have like, let's say, manufacturing in Asia and you have extra extra parts to your shipping process where a bunch of product comes over on a vessel and you have to track that. It doesn't really correspond to like a truck or a shipper exactly because those things haven't even been loaded yet. And so you don't really have any way to track this inside of Plex. So you can imagine create like a custom object for a booking. And let's say the booking's like a header and I have lines, which are like the individual containers, like giant metal boxes that go on ships. And then the product underneath it, maybe I'm creating another entity to like maintain like freight cost information, or like I have a custom almost like setup table of brokers who might be managing my logistics, things like that. So things that Plex doesn't have out of the box at all that you're probably tracking in spreadsheets, you can already today, for the last like 9 months or so, create these tables to maintain it. But they're just tables. Like you have really basic data entry screens. You could use it via APIs, but you haven't been able to create user interfaces to really turn it into an application. So as you can guess where this is going, the capability that it's not live yet, I'll get to that in a second, but we have this new capability within VisionPlex, and there's really multiple pieces to it, and it's for you to create custom applications built around these custom objects. Okay, so you, like today, David kind of implied that you can create forms. That's actually a really recent / forthcoming thing for customers. Like partners have been able to do it, and Plex has obviously been able to do it. But you will be able to create not just the grids that you're used to, but also form type screens. Like, and it can be like this, 2 different columns with, let's say, a grid beneath it of this happens to be an example of like a field service incident thing somebody built, where you're tracking discrepancies against like a particular job, particular part. That project is actually another custom object just to sort of relate it to something. And then there's status and outcome related information it can be assigned. And the thing at the bottom is like a series of notes that are added. And you can see there's like an add note button, which implies, yes, you'd be able to go to another form where you can add a note, and it's almost like a header and lines. But that's a pretty simple example of a header and lines. You can go way further than that. It can be similar to how like invoices work, where you have like an editable grid of lines. Like if you think of like an AP or AR invoice, or it can be something where I'm clicking like a link on the grid, drilling into a larger form of something more complex that I'm maintaining. So we're adding this capability, and this is, again, I'll get to timing and, you know, if you are interested in participating in like early adopter thing in a moment. But this is really sort of the critical ingredients to you being able to create pretty sophisticated applications out of thin air. Because as David really kind of pointed out, you can make all these screens like link to each other and pass parameters. And what is any application in Plex other than a bunch of grids and forms and relationships between all of those things? So you can actually create pretty sophisticated applications, things like this field service discrepancy log. I already kind of described like ocean freight booking, warranty claims management. Like Plex already has a warranty claim form. Maybe it's not, you know, as robust as you need it, and you want to kind of create your own for something because you're, again, maybe tracking something in spreadsheets today. Maybe you need to be multi-tier and have like detailed analysis records against individual parts and not just, you know, one giant header. Maybe you're needing to get real scrappy, like, man, there's a lot of tariff stuff going on. How do I handle any of this right now? And you know, the flexibility that something like this provides lets you adapt very quickly, build something inside of Plex where your people already are, you know, and then kind of create a standard process. And then, you know, who knows? There's all kinds of other modules that somebody could resurrect if they desperately wanted to bring that back. There's an inside joke there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm sure someone will explain it. All right, so just to get pretty nitty gritty here, and this is kind of my last slide, or my last slide before I kind of have a call to action here. But already today, I don't really need to tell you everything VisionPlex can already do, because we've pretty much exhausted that with our conversations today. But it's like today, or historically, it's just sort of, yes, you can use it to customize or tailor any Plex authored screens that were built in VisionPlex. Around 1/3 of the applications that you can get to through the standard Plex menu or VisionPlex. So you can use it to, you know, tailor those. But the main way that you've been using it to date is creating probably reports, but some kind of read-only just grid of information. It's not really a true application. It's not really something you can act on. It's not really something that has like a call to action about it. But, you know, we have limited forms of visualization like graphs and charts. There's the conditional formatting stuff and all of the like scripting language that we went over, expressions. And then partners, as David pointed out, have some advanced capabilities, and so they can build you some pretty sophisticated stuff using VisionPlex if it calls for it. So here's the things that are on the horizon, and that is, so you can create your own applications that can read and write that custom object data. In terms of like, so I already kind of said you can have custom objects that are, let's say, header and line, or a header that points to, I gave an example pointing to a project where the project itself was just a different custom object. So how does that work? You can actually, I won't get nitty gritty here, but you can kind of traverse those relationships on the grids that you're building. So you're not stuck just looking at like one record at a time on a grid. You can actually like show the header and things it references and all the fields from that thing that it references together. on the same grid, even on the same forms in a relatively limited kind of way. And aside from just forms, I don't have a screenshot for this, but we are adding, and David already got at this, we're adding the ability to create layouts that are way more flexible. So like think like a 3x2, or pretty much anything. If you're familiar with like HTML tables, any kind of layout you could build with like a table. So if you think about the control panel, for example, it's almost like a 3x3. Is that how I would imagine it? Where maybe the bottom, like one of the things spans 2 different cells. If you kind of think of tables like that, you will be able to build screens that are shaped however you want them to be shaped. That's been a capability that's missing in VisionPlex UX for quite a while. And then also, if you're familiar with process flows, like for these custom applications, you'll be able to make them do relatively sophisticated things through process flows. So it'll still be kind of on a schedule, at least for now, if you're familiar with all that. But imagine I can build a record, and that record's meant to be a rule. One thing that was in Plex Classic that I remember being on the community a little while back that wasn't moved to UX is like freight term adjustments, which are just these little rules that say like, if my order is worth more than this amount of money, then change the freight terms to like give them free freight. You could imagine creating a custom object that's just a rule of, here's a freight term, here's the amount, maybe here's the customer it applies to, whatever. And then process flows interacting with that, just sort of enforcing those rules through its own custom logic. So if you can get pretty sophisticated with the kind of things that you're able to build now with all these various like Plex Extend capabilities plugging into each other. So that being said, this UI builder for custom objects is not live yet. It does major chunks of it happen to be in test, and kind of we saw evidence of that in various times today, like when Tammy was on screen and we saw the words custom objects applying, but it's not in production yet. And it's certainly even though it will be in the next couple of weeks, like not everybody will have access to it. We want to run a pretty fast-paced limited availability program for this. So I'm not going to get crazy sophisticated because this is really just sort of enhancements to VisionPlex. But I do want to find some of you, and there's a couple of you who have already reached out, and so take it for granted that you're involved. But some of you who like maybe you have things just occur to you off the top of your head, like, man, I just want to build a data management app for this kind of thing that Plex just doesn't like have a concept of. The ones that are the most interesting are like MES, like plant floor related, because those are the ones that apply to like most customers. Or let's go the other opposite end, something super industry specific, like something that really kind of demonstrates your ability to create these helped fill a niche gap of something that realistically we were never going to design the product to do. Both of those kinds of use cases are like super interesting to us. So if something's like immediately came to mind as I was talking about this, send me an email, say, hey, here's my idea. I want to build this thing, and I'm going to launch this limited availability program in May. When's it going to be available to everyone else? Who knows? I need some participants, so I'm not gonna tell you any intended timelines. I would like you to participate if you're super excited about this. But it's obviously gonna be this year. I'll say that at minimum. All right, that was my last slide. We have 10 minutes left. What questions do we have for me? And then I don't know, David, if we if there weren't any for me, like, do we want to kind of open this up for just general conversations, or do we want to close? What conversations do we have for me? And I didn't look at the chat. Nobody?
Devin, I'm in. This is Scott at Fisher. If I can get on the LA, that'd be great. We're already doing a tariff custom table.
Yeah. You're one of my intended parties. And then is Accuride still on? Because you know, we have a couple low-hanging fruit things there that I could help you all with if Kale's still on.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, I can think of a couple of things we can talk about if you'd like to.
Yeah, warranty would be interesting as if that's one of those on your list.
Yeah, warranty or bookings.
Yeah.
I know the tail end of the year there, I do want to make the funeral management module again.
Yeah.
I need some revival.
All things are suddenly possible. Yeah.
Are you just dying to do that, David?
Oh yeah, I mean people have been dying to see that in UX.
It looks like in the comments, Devin, a lot of people, unless it was commented on already, a lot of people are interested in the custom objects, custom fields. I'm suspecting potentially being used as like tokens in workflows might be the use case for that comment. But any plans on having data extensions, custom objects, process flows tie into workflow was a
It'd be real cool.
Oh, I missed some questions here. Yeah. So maybe I don't want to bore you with saying things are more complicated than they should be, so maybe, but there are, if you've got some like high value use cases around that, there are ways that you can already interface process flows and, you know, traditional workflow, which would be a method to basically using a custom field or custom object as a token. Like if I had to summarize it, I basically say your workflow goes so far, let's say it gets assigned to dummy user 2. There's a flow that runs within 15 minutes, says, oh, look, dummy user 2 is an assignment. I'm going to make some decisions using, you know, all this data I have access to, which is pretty much anything with a data source or custom field or custom object, and then make the decision in the workflow to keep it routing. So sounds a little convoluted, but it's actually like way more powerful than if we just made it expose them as tokens. So that is already possible, and I can help somebody understand how to go about that if that's you know, if that's high enough value to somebody. So I'm scrolling back up. I'm trying to see if there are any other questions.
Are these pending updates to the custom objects? Why the APIs aren't working today?
I saw your email. I haven't looked at that to know, because it's on the support team.
It stopped working on Friday, if that helps, like the authentication.
So this is like a big thing. It's not a Fisher thing. It's a thing. Okay.
It's a thing.
Yeah, got it. I will follow up about that. I am a little surprised support didn't reach out to me directly about that. Okay. I will follow up about that. No, I don't see any relationship between how the APIs would have been impacted and anything we're doing with VisionPlex.
That's good.
Stop presenting. All right, David, you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I just had one last thing I wanted to share here to wrap us up today. So all of the presentations here we get today were like lovingly selected by the developer user group board here and kind of put together. We're really calling for some presenters here. We're going to put out a schedule for the next couple of user group meetings and topics. And I would just ask you, if you found some value in this and you have something to share that you feel like can bring value to others, whether you want to do that by yourself or you want to have someone present with you on that, please reach out. We'd love to have you present. Even if it's your first time presenting, we can help you through it. And then look forward to the developer user group. We're gonna post this video here. It's in its entirety. And we're gonna have each section kind of broken out for talking point. If you really wanna go to, and if you had an issue, which some people in the chats with Devin's presentation, if you really want to go just to Devin's presentation, or you want to go to Tammy's right at the beginning, we're going to split those out for you. Again, I appreciate you guys' time. I know we've got 1,000 things to do, and your time is valuable, and I hope you guys got some value out of this. And we're happy to keep this user group going, showing you guys new cool things.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you all. I hope you have a great rest of your Tuesday. As I said, I think it's Tuesday all day long, runs till midnight, so make the best of it. All right, have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.